Part 23. Doomsday, I am the only one in the world who has superpowers. Author, Gugu Da. Chapter 221. Chapter 221, Fierce Battle with Zombie Cats, 3 long minutes. 3 minutes. Chu Hanyan took a deep breath and tried to survive these 3 minutes if she wanted to live. Otherwise, there would be only death. After saying the last words, Concubine Huyu quickly moved her feet and rushed towards the zombie cats. When Concubine Huyu took the initiative to provoke her, the 3 zombie cats meowed in a low tone with a threatening meaning. Just like zombies do not actively infect animals, the zombie virus seems to have very little effect on animals. Even after being infected, the cat still retains simple wisdom and has a high level of confidence in Huyu Fei, the enemy who killed her companions. Of vigilance. Concubine Huyu ignored the threat of the zombie cat at all. She only had one idea now, which was to kill the zombie cat in front of her, and as soon as possible. As Concubine Huyu approached quickly, the 3 zombie cats felt the strong threat. Without hesitation, they rushed towards Concubine Huyu. The enraged zombie cats had already thrown away their simple wisdom. Humans are irrational when angry, let alone zombie cats with simple intelligence. 3 zombie cats rushed towards Concubine Huyu at the same time. The first 2 were very fast, and the lame zombie cat was lagging behind. Before the zombie cat could rush towards Concubine Huyu, a baseball bat hit her with a whistling sound. Falling, the lame zombie cat neighed sharply and backed away, looking warily at Chu Hanyan who rushed to block the way. Meow. The sharp chirping sounded like a warning. The zombie cats didn't look like pets at this time. Their transformation into zombies had awakened their primitive hunting instincts. They lowered their bodies like a cheetah and kept circling around Chu Hanyan. Wander. On the other side, 2 intact zombie cats are very fast. All cats have one characteristic, that is, they burst out quickly, but their endurance is insufficient. Cats are very fast, and it is difficult for ordinary humans to keep up with the speed of cats. Especially the dynamic vision of cats is even more abnormal. Often when you just raise your hand, the cat will already avoid it. Zombie cats infected with zombie viruses simply have maximum battery life, small size, fast speed, and terrifying infectivity. These characteristics make zombie cats almost a nightmare for ordinary people. A simple scratch can be fatal. The zombie cat was very fast, especially when it was running on the ground. It was so fast that it almost left an afterimage. It didn't even take half a second to cover a distance of several meters. Concubine Huyu only felt that her eyes were blurred by 2 zombies. The cat jumped in front of me. Pupils suddenly shrank, Huyu Fei leaned back, and used an iron bridge to escape the fatal attack of 2 zombie cats. She slapped the ground behind her with one hand, and her figure spun around, turning around instantly. The zombie cats were so flexible that they stopped their forward momentum the moment they landed. The 2 zombie cats separated to both sides, walking on cat steps, purring deeply. The 2 zombie cat soldiers were divided into 2 groups, which greatly divided Huyu Fei's attention. She could not pay attention to the zombie cats on both sides at the same time, which was unrealistic. Highly nervous, Concubine Huyu remained calm and collected. She knew that the 2 zombie cats would attack at any time. If she didn't stay calm, she would take care of it herself, not to mention helping Chu Hanyan. The 2 zombie cats kept wandering around Concubine Huyu. The zombie cat's patience was obviously not enough. After wandering around for a few times, the zombie cat on the left couldn't bear it anymore and let out a low chirping sound. The figure suddenly moved towards Huyu. The concubine jumped over, and almost as soon as the zombie cat on the left moved, the zombie cat on the right also pounced. However, what this zombie cat pounced on was not Concubine Huyu's head, but the area below her vagina. With enemies on both sides, Concubine Huyu squatted down, raised the pistol in her hand, and pulled the trigger in an instant. Boom! Amidst the piercing sound of gunfire, a bullet burst out of the barrel. The zombie cat that flew over had nowhere to rely on in mid-air. A bullet flew past the chin in an instant and penetrated directly through the Tianling guy. Blood spattered and it was completely dead when it hit the ground. Turned into a dead cat. Meow. Amidst the shrill and piercing chirping, another zombie cat that had missed the attack had already pounced up, heading straight for Concubine Huyu's face. Its sharp claws had already poked out of the flesh pads. As long as it was caught, it would inevitably be infected by the zombies. Virus. Pupils shrank to the extreme, and Concubine Huyu lay back on the ground, then raised the pistol. Facing the black muzzle, although the zombie cat was simple in wisdom, she also knew that since last night, this dark something strange spewed out flames, and then killed each of his companions. The zombie cat had a strong fear of this black thing. Facing the muzzle of the gun, the zombie cat flew toward him and hissed, his head quickly moved to the side, and his claws were subconsciously retracted. Keep it in front of your head. Concubine Huyu's eyes flashed, and she grabbed out with her left hand instantly. She grabbed the zombie cat's tail in a flash, and then swung it hard towards the ground. Boom! The zombie cat was thrown to the ground with force, making a muffled sound, and blood spattered on the ground. Fearing that the zombie cat would not die, Concubine Huyu swung it hard again and smashed it towards the other side. Boom! Blood splashed, and looking at the bloody hole on the zombie cat's head, Concubine Huyu breathed a sigh of relief. If it wasn't dead, it was definitely a spirit. After finishing her side, Concubine Huyu quickly looked over to Chu Hanyan. She was so nervous just now that she had no time to pay attention to Chu Hanyan's situation. Now that she looked over, she felt relieved. Unlike Concubine Huyu, Chu Hanyan is just an ordinary girl. At most, she occasionally runs for exercise. Facing the attack of zombie cats, she is no different from ordinary human women. At most, the limp zombie cats are slower. It gave her more time to react. Even if injured, zombie cats are still very aggressive, especially Chuan only held a baseball bat in his hand, not the short black thing that breathed fire that he was afraid of. With a low cry, the zombie cat launched an attack. Chu Hanyan narrowly escaped each attack. Fortunately, the zombie cat was already lame and its speed seemed much slower. Otherwise, she would have been caught long ago. Hurt. But despite this, her situation is not optimistic. Just 3 minutes, it seems like 3 centuries. Every second is a great torment for Chu Hanyan. The feeling of high concentration makes her very tired, both physically and mentally. Just like what she said, if you run for too long, you will be exhausted sooner or later. Although she took a short break of 1 or 2 minutes, for her, it was not even time to catch her breath. Chu Hanyan didn't dare to attack rashly. Concubine Huyu was right. Don't attack rashly. That would leave her open and full of flaws. If she missed a hit, she would be easily attacked by the zombie cat. Keeping in mind what Concubine Huyu said, Chu Hanyan had been avoiding, bending down, and lowering her body. These simple movements allowed her to quickly turn around and face the zombie cat directly, without giving the zombie cat any opportunity to take advantage of it. Until the zombie cat became increasingly irritable, and the flying distance became further and further away. There was no way to borrow strength from the air. Looking at the zombie cat's sharp claws and open jaw full of fangs, Chu Hanyan's eyes were firm. She knew this was an opportunity. Seeing the zombie cat getting closer and closer, Chu Hanyan suddenly picked up the baseball bat and hit it hard. However, she misjudged her strength and speed, or in other words, she misjudged the level of exhaustion of her body. Running up to this point in the middle of the night, stopping and walking, had almost exhausted all of her physical strength, and the intense concentration made her poor health even worse. A step slower. I gave the command in my mind, and when my arm reacted, it was already a step too slow to swing out, but the result was still good. Boom. The stick was swung out, and the zombie cat was hit in the abdomen. A powerful and heavy blow was never something that a petite animal like the zombie cat could resist. Click. Meow. Amidst the screams, the zombie cat's spine was broken and it was knocked out. It fell to the ground 2 meters away, struggling to get up. But looking at the zombie cat lying on the ground with only the front half of its limbs still moving, Chu Hanyan didn't feel much joy. He stepped forward silently and looked at the zombie cat on the ground. Chu Hanyan swung the baseball bat hard and pointed it at the zombie cat. Smashed it down fiercely. Bang 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 bang. Smashing it like crazy, soon the zombie cat showed no signs of movement and was completely smashed into meat patties. What Hu Yufei saw was Chu Hanyan beating the zombie cat away. Walking to Chu Hanyan in silence, concubine Hu Yu was aware of the tremendous pressure she had just endured. She patted her shoulder comfortingly and said softly, "It's okay, it's okay, it's all over." As a killer, concubine Hu Yu knew how much pressure Chu Hanyan was under during this period. In the beginning, she also came through it like this. The horror between life and death could not be overcome at all. Dhamma is expressed in words. He stopped what he was doing, and the baseball bat in his hand fell to the ground with a clanking sound. Snapped. What concubine Hu Yu didn't expect was that Chu Hanyan pushed her away. Even when she was unprepared, he snatched the pistol from her hand and quickly backed away, pointing the gun at her. Concubine Hu Yu had a look of astonishment on her face. She didn't expect that Chu Hanyan would do this at this time, betrayed. Concubine Hu Yu felt an indescribable loss in her heart. Although as a killer, her heart had become cold to a certain extent. She never expected that at this time, she would be betrayed by someone with a gun. Is this human nature in the apocalypse? She didn't expect that this day would come to her, but she was not as afraid as she imagined. As a killer, she knew clearly that there were no bullets in the gun, otherwise she would not have been able to kill the zombie cat in the end with her hands. There was unspeakable self-mockery on concubine Hu Yu's face. She was not afraid of the gun. She took a step forward. A gun without bullets was worse than a fire stick. But what concubine Hu Yu didn't expect was that she was pointing the gun at her. Chu Hanyan turned her arm and put the muzzle of the gun on her own head. Concubine Hu Yu was stunned. She didn't understand what kind of trick Chu Hanyan was trying to steal her gun and then point it at her own head. What does this mean? You. Concubine Hu Yu subconsciously spoke, but before she could ask, she saw Chu Hanyan, who had been lowering his head, raised his head, and then she was stunned again. On Chu Hanyan's face, a scratch was so clear that blood beads rolled down from the wound. You could even see that the blood had changed color and showed signs of infection. The wound was too close to the head. In such a short period of time, Chu Hanyan's eyes and around the corners of his eyes showed signs of becoming a zombie. There were ferocious cyan blood vessels in the corners of his eyes, and his pupils were faintly white. Now concubine Hu Yu understands, she understands why Chu Hanyan wants to snatch her gun, and also understands why she points the gun at her head. I don't want to turn into a zombie, it would be too painful any other way, so I'm sorry to waste a bullet on you. There was fear on Chu Hanyan's face, as well as desire and yearning for life. No one wants to die. Slowly closing his eyes, Chu Hanyan pulled the trigger hard. Doomsday, I am the only one in the world who has superpowers. Author, Gugu Da. Chapter 222. Chapter 222, My first love just started, but I fell out of love, Lan Shao click. The barrel of the gun collapsed, but no bullet was fired. Chu Hanyan shivered, but the expected pain did not come, and Chu Hanyan was stunned. After pulling the trigger several times, there was a click sound. Chu Hanyan held the pistol in front of him blankly. He was stunned when he looked at the pistol without bullets. How come? Looking at concubine Hu Yu walking over step by step, Chu Hanyan anxiously extended her hand. Bullet, give me a bullet, Okay. Looking at the helpless Chu Hanyan, concubine Hu Yu felt indescribably sad. After a while, Chu Hanyan's zombie transformation became more obvious. In 1 minute at most, she might be infected into a zombie. It was just an insignificant wound. Concubine Hu Yu wanted to curse angrily, but she didn't know what to curse. At this time, she no longer felt the sadness of being betrayed before. Chu Hanyan was going to die, and she was going to change. She has become a zombie. Over the past month or so, she has seen too many people infected and turned into zombies. Now that she has finally escaped here, Chu Hanyan is about to turn into a zombie in front of her eyes. What should she do? Do you regret it? Maybe Chu Hanyan should not have been brought out from the beginning. If Chu Hanyan had stayed in Baiwan Business Building, she would not have turned into a zombie. She could actually escape by herself, even those zombies, even the cat couldn't do anything to her. But she didn't want to bear the loneliness of being alone, so she brought Chu Hanyan out, but she didn't expect that this would harm her. Looking at Chu Hanyan's extended hand, concubine Hu Yu shook her head in silence. She had no more bullets. Seeing concubine Hu Yu shaking her head, Chu Hanyan's eyes were dull, and then she rushed to concubine Hu Yu like crazy, grabbed her hot pants, and touched her with her hands. Got in. There are more, there must be more, you can hide so many things here, there must be more. Concubine Hu Yu did not move, and let Chu Hanyan search for a while. Even if he came across some hidden places of hers, concubine Hu Yu did not move. No matter how the hot pants are designed, how much can they hold? 1 gun and 2 the magazine is already at its limit. After running for half a night, the bullets have been used up by now. Concubine Hu Yu did not move. She understood Chu Hanyan's current mood, even though she knew that Chu Hanyan was about to mutate into a zombie. Didn't move. Maybe this is the end, there is no hope, only endless despair. If we simply continue to be so desperate, it would not be bad to be bitten to death by Chu Hanyan who transformed into a corpse. Isn't it a good idea for you to be playing like this in broad daylight? According to me, even if you can't bear it anymore, at least find a room, right? There are so many rooms around. The sudden sound from behind instantly made concubine Hu Yu and Chu Hanyan nervous. They subconsciously pulled Chu Hanyan behind them. Concubine Hu Yu looked in the direction of the sound. On the second floor, dozens of meters away, the man was sitting on the railing, looking at her with wide eyes. Concubine Hu Yu lowered her head and looked at the hot pants that Chu Hanyan had pulled open. Her expression turned pale and she quickly pulled them up. The railing on the second floor, Lin Fan had been sitting here for a while. It was probably when concubine Hu Yu and the two of them were dealing with the zombie cat that Lin Fan rushed here. More than 2 hours were enough for Lin Fan to travel more than 10 kilometers to Beidou. The UN business building is nearby. Lin Fan still agrees with the safe environment around the Baiwan business building. It does look like a safe gathering place, and looking at such a large area, the leader of the Baiwan business building still has some abilities. Walking all the way straight to the Baiwan business building, he happened to bump into 2 women who were fighting a zombie cat. Lin Fan thought it was quite interesting, so he kept watching. Are zombie cats scary? For ordinary people, this is simply a nightmare, but Hu Yu's performance is very impressive, agile, ruthless, and even very smart. She took advantage of the zombie cat's instinct to avoid danger and killed the last zombie cat in one fell swoop. This requires very careful thinking and great courage. If it just fails, the result will be an extra wound on the body. The performance of both women is very good, better than many women, among them concubine Hu Yu is the best. This enchanting and wild woman, Lin Fan likes her very much. As for Chu Hanyan next to her, although this girl looks weak and not as eye-catching as concubine Hu Yu, her kind of decisiveness is not something ordinary people can have. Who can face it head on? Death. Who can? Not everyone has the courage to point a gun to their head and pull the trigger. Generally speaking, these two women are very good. The weaker Chu Hanyan is also valuable to cultivate, which makes Lin Fan felt that his trip was worthwhile. Even if he didn't get anything out of this trip, Lin Fan would not be disappointed if he only had these two women. It would be even better if he could find Li Yun's daughter Chu Hanyan at this moment. Lin Fan still didn't know that Chu Hanyan was the one who dared to commit suicide. He jumped down from the second floor and stood firmly on the ground without even shaking his shoulders. This height was too high for Lin Fan. It's just a jump of one step, only 5 or 6 meters, even 50 or 60 meters is nothing to Lin Fan. But in Hu Yuefei's eyes, the pressure seems very great. 5 or 6 meters height, without any means of unloading force, he fell straight to the ground without even the slightest discomfort. This strength, concubine Hu Yu was very wary. She could jump down from a height of 5 to 6 meters without getting hurt, but that would require unloading the force. With Lin Fan like this, she would at least be numbed by shock. If she was unlucky, she might even get contusions. Seeing the vigilance in concubine Hu Yu's eyes, Lin Fan didn't take it seriously at all. Seeing Lin Fan getting closer and closer, concubine Hu Yu really had no choice but to keep retreating. "Don't come here, I have a person here who is about to transform into a corpse. You'd better think carefully. If you want to use force, you may risk your own life. I suggest you change your target." Chu Hanyan couldn't laugh or cry in her heart. What is she? A deterrent weapon? At the same time, Chu Hanyan felt helpless, and she felt more and more dizzy, and even wanted to retching. She knew that she really couldn't hold on for much longer. Chu Hanyan Lin Fan also felt the abnormality. He ignored the thought of playing and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already at Chu Hanyan's side. He pulled Chu Hanyan and ignored her struggle. Lin Fan held his hand, put it on her face, and the wood element energy slowly surged over. "If you don't want to become a zombie, just be honest." Although Chu Hanyan's mind was a little unclear, she was still struggling instinctively. She suddenly felt a little dizzy when she heard Lin Fan's words. "What do you mean? Can she be saved?" Chu Hanyan is not clear-headed now. But concubine Hu Yu was clear-headed. She saw Lin Fan suddenly disappearing, suddenly appearing behind her, and attacking Chu Hanyan. How could she hold back now? She hit Lin Fan with an elbow on the head. A powerful and heavy blow was aimed at the temple. If this blow hit, concubine Hu Yu would have 100% confidence to kill the man in front of her. Then she was hung up. A vine was tied to her at some point. On her ankles, concubine Hu Yu screamed, and she was hung up in the air. Her dark golden hair fell straight to the ground. The hanging posture made the two already spectacular big pigs almost fall out of their clothes. "Jump out of your collar and breathe fresh air." If you put me down, are you still a human?" She is about to turn into a zombie. "If you can, come to me. Bastard, come at me if you can." Not even bothering to pay attention to concubine Hu Yu, Lin Fan mobilized the wood element energy to cleanse the zombie virus in Chu Hanyan's body. As long as he has not turned into a zombie, the wood element energy can save him. If he is completely infected and turns into a zombie, then there was really nothing left to do. Under Lin Fan's treatment, the veins in the corners of Chu Hanyan's eyes gradually faded away, and some of his dead gray pupils gradually returned to normal human appearance. Even his unconscious mind began to become clearer. Concubine Hu Yu is not blind, and being hung upside down does not affect her vision. Seeing the zombie phenomenon gradually disappearing on Chu Hanyan's face, concubine Hu Yu is dumbfounded. Can she be saved after being infected by the zombie virus? Thinking of the words she just scolded, concubine Hu Yu was a little embarrassed. This was embarrassing. She thought they were here to save people. There was no way, the first impression was too important. When she looked up, She saw Lin Fan staring at her unzipped hot pants, and his eyes were so wide. No one else would have a good impression. Looking up at the vines tied to her ankles, concubine Hu Yu rolled up, grabbed the vines with both hands, and untied them in a matter of minutes. This was just an attempt, but she seemed to have made the right bet. Landing deftly on the ground, concubine Hu Yu ran to Chu Hanyan's side in a few steps, staring at Lin Fan, her eyes filled with disbelief. The zombie virus has been almost eliminated. Chu Hanyan is now completely awake. He is leaning in Lin Fan's arms, his face is covered by Lin Fan's big hands. The feeling of safety and warmth makes Chu Hanyan not want to move. He opens his eyes and looks at the sky above. Lin Fan couldn't move his eyes away. Chu Hanyan's almost nymphomaniacal behavior made concubine Hu Yu roll her eyes. This double standard was really too much. She had saved Chu Hanyan several times along the way. Why didn't Chu Hanyan become like this? Is this a woman? Can't walk when you see a handsome man with good temperament? Hitui. After cleaning the zombie virus from Chu Hanyan's body, Lin Fan took back his hand and looked at Chu Hanyan, whose eyes were almost straight. Lin Fan felt quite proud. The zombie virus has been cleaned out of your body, get up. Ah. Is this cleaned up? So fast, Chu Hanyan didn't react, so he spoke subconsciously. After saying this, he reacted. He hurriedly ran out of Lin Fan's arms. Chu Hanyan wanted to find a crack in the ground and crawl in. This is so fucking embarrassing. Concubine Hu Yu also looked at Chu Hanyan speechlessly. What, you didn't wait enough, right? He stood up calmly. He had encountered this kind of thing so many times that he was almost used to it. This morning, he was taken advantage of by a group of women. Didn't he also bear it? Lin Fan glanced at concubine Hu Yu and the two of them. Lin Fan looked at Baiwen Business Building 1 kilometer away and asked, did you come out of Baiwen Business Building? Or are you planning to go there? Concubine Hu Yu looking at Lin Fan, he said we escaped from there, but we were attacked by zombie cats. Escaped? Lin Fan frowned and had a bad feeling in his heart. Since you escaped from there, I have something to ask you. Specifically, I want to ask about a person. Do you know Chu Hanyan? Concubine Hu Yu had just walked to Chu Hanyan. When she heard Lin Fan's words, she was stunned. Chu Hanyan, the person involved, was also confused. Is she looking for her? Or does he have the same name? Who is Chu Hanyan you ask about? Chu Hanyan looked at Lin Fan and confirmed several times. She really didn't know or met Lin Fan. She was a little disappointed. She felt that it was probably the same name. Chu in Chu Han, Han next to the word, Yan in Misty Rain. How about it, do you recognize it? Chu Hanyan? The words are all the same, so that's outrageous, right? Is her mother's name Li Yun? Her father's name is Chu Tianxiang. I don't know if her father's name is Chu Tianxiang, but I know her mother's name is Li Yun. Do you know her? Do you know each other? Do you know each other? Do you know each other? Concubine Hu Yu and Chu Hanyan looked at each other. This is more than just acquaintance, isn't this her? You, who are you? Does it have anything to do with Chu Hanyan? Lin Fan always felt that the two people in front of him were a bit strange, and he couldn't tell where they were for a while. My name is Lin Fan. If we insist on talking about relationship, I am the stepfather? Now Li Yun is my woman. Click. Chu Hanyan's eyes were dull, and she seemed to hear the sound of heartbreak. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Doomsday, I am the only one in the world who has superpowers. Author, Gugu Da. Chapter 223. Chapter 223. I'm sorry, it felt so good, I couldn't hold it back for a while. What is the happiest thing in life? She has been solo for 20 years and was saved by a hero when she was about to die. She happened to be very handsome and handsome enough to make people's hearts flutter. She wanted to commit herself to her. She even thought about the name of the child in the future and how many children she would have. Already. The most tragic thing in life is when a mother has been solo for more than 20 years, and suddenly she is saved by a hero, and her heart suddenly beats, and she has the feeling of first love, and even when she wants to get married, she has already decided what to name her future children. Suddenly discovered that his biological mother had already taken the lead, and the other party became his stepfather. The ups and downs in life, the feeling of going from hell to heaven, are nothing better than this. Under the great joy and sorrow, Chu Hanyan now feels like he has lost his soul, his eyes are empty and his expression is dull, just like some kind of doll sold on a certain treasure. Beside Chu Hanyan, concubine Hu Yu felt extremely weird. What a coincidence, right? Looking at Chu Hanyan with pity, concubine Hu Yu couldn't help but shake her head. Poor child, I hope there is no stepfather or stepfather in heaven. Lin Fan was a little stunned by Chu Hanyan's bizarre appearance. How could this perfectly good child seem to have lost his direction in life? Weren't you still alive and kicking just now? Is it possible that the zombie virus has not been cleaned out? That's impossible. He checked it several times and it was absolutely fine. What's going on here? Concubine Hu Yu thought for a while, pointed at Chu Hanyan, and said, she is the Chu Hanyan you are looking for. Being employed by others, concubine Hu Yu knows Chu Hanyan's family situation very well. If she doesn't even know the situation of the person she attacks, and the information is so limited, she probably doesn't know how she died, so don't become a killer. It's better to just find a good place and bury yourself to save trouble. This. After listening to concubine Hu Yu's words, Lin Fan was stunned. He looked at Chu Hanyan again. He now understood why the woman in front of him was fine just now, but suddenly she looked hopeless. What a coincidence. Now that he has found Chu Hanyan, Lin Fan has nothing to worry about. He is not in a hurry to go to Baiwan Business Building. Compared to Baiwan Business Building, Lin Fan is very interested in the wild woman in front of him. May I have your name? Judging from your skills, you don't look like an ordinary person, female bodyguard? Policewoman. The woman in front of him has extraordinary skills. To what extent, Lin Fan is not sure. Anyway, she is very powerful. And there is a high probability that she is a bodyguard or a policewoman who can accompany Chu Hanyan. What should I say about Chu Hanyan's father? He is also the chief director of the Magic City Police Department. He has great power. He should provide his daughter with bodyguards, reasonable, right? Either she was a policewoman, otherwise this woman would not be able to protect Chu Hanyan so much. Seeing Lin Fan turning his attention to herself, concubine Hu Yu shook her head with a smile, matching her face, which was full of enchanting and wild charm. My name is Hu Yu Fei. My identity is exactly the opposite of the two you mentioned. I am not here to protect her. I am a killer. If the apocalypse hadn't happened, I might have kidnapped Chu Hanyan. Concubine Hu Yu has nothing to hide. If he didn't tell her, Lin Fan wouldn't ask Chu Hanyan? Lin Fan. Lin Fan was speechless. What is this? The killer who came to kidnap Chu Hanyan turned into a bodyguard? Could it be any more outrageous? How is this different from a wolf protecting a sheep? If it was a killer, that would make sense, but this identity was so outrageous that Lin Fan didn't even think about it. Knowing the identities of the two women, Lin Fan turned to look at Baiwan Business Building and suddenly asked, you just said you escaped from there, right? What happened in Baiwan Business Building? Why did you escape? Zombie cats attacked the survivor gathering place. Has it fallen? Chu Hanyan is still in a state of doubting life. Concubine Hu Yu rolled her eyes helplessly and explained, when we came out, Zombie cats. There was indeed an attack on the Baiwan business building, but I don't know the specific circumstances, but the reason we escaped was not because of the zombie cat attack, but because we had to escape. We had to escape? Lin Fan thought for a moment and asked, how do you say that? The people in charge of the Baiwan business building oppressed the survivors. Asked women to sell their bodies. It's almost there, but it hasn't been implemented yet. Concubine Hu nodded and said the people in charge of the Baiwan business building are a group of mercenaries. They just raided the police station and obtained a large amount of equipment. The situation was very optimistic at first. The captain of this group of mercenaries has an idea, an ambitious person. He wants to build a huge force, so he is very good to the survivors, but the Chinbei power station exploded, cutting off his development path. I also heard some bad news through the bug. Today, those people plan to clean up all the men, keep the useful ones and kill the useless ones. This way save food. As for women, they are reduced to a tool to vent, only providing a small amount of food. Based on this situation, we had no choice but to escape, but we were not very lucky. We happened to encounter a zombie cat last night. You have seen what happened next, so I won't go into details. Lin Fan never expected that this could be related to him. This bomb of his has caused a lot of problems. He didn't even dare to think about what would happen to the Magic City if it was bombed indiscriminately without any restrictions. How bad will it be? So that's it, you guys go to Baiwan business building with me now, and after I take it down, I'll take you back to my place. Chu Hanyan has been found. Today's mission is half completed. Next are the survivors in the Baiwan business building. He doesn't care about the men, but the women must be taken away. The city of Judgment is very short of people now. Almost the entire area within a radius of 20 kilometers is empty. Is this how to go? I may have forgotten to tell you that Baiwan business building has its own armed forces, and they all have weapons such as pistols. How about hundreds of people, and you just go there like this? Seeing that Lin Fan was about to leave, Concubine Hu quickly stopped her. Just kidding, even though you have some superpowers, you can't be so disrespectful of others. There are hundreds of people. Didn't you die in the past? Chu Hanyan also woke up at this moment. In fact, she had been listening to what Lin Fan and Concubine Hu were saying, but she didn't want to talk or say anything, but this didn't mean that she wanted to watch Lin Fan go. Death. Quickly ran in front of Lin Fan and opened his arms to block Lin Fan's way. Looking at Lin Fan's face, especially thinking of Lin Fan's current status, Chu Hanyan felt like he wanted to cry but couldn't. Don't go. If you go like this, you will die. There are many of them with many guns. What will my mother do if you die? Lin Fan found it so difficult. He was thinking, would it be better if he wrote a note and stuck it on his forehead in the future, writing nothing but 3 words, I am invincible? There are only a few hundred people there. Just want to kill him. Even if you try it 1,000 times, it won't be enough for him to beat him. He is not afraid of nuclear bombs, but will he be afraid of pistols? He raised his hand and grabbed Chu Hanyan like a chicken, and looked at Concubine Hu next to him. When he was about to run away, Lin Fan casually made a move, but he didn't run away. He was caught back with claws and teeth, and was held tightly in his arms. Being hugged by Lin Fan, Chu Hanyan's face turned pale, and he struggled a few times. She broke away, lowered her head and stopped moving, and began to pretend to be an ostrich, but Concubine Hu was different. This woman had a wild and ruthless character. Even when she was trapped by her arms, she did not give up her struggle. Her body was like a female leopard, resisting. Very intense. Hey, 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 let me go. I'm not that silly girl from Chu Hanyan who acts like a nympho every minute. I'm not a good-looking person. Don't mess around. Let me go. Concubine Hu resisted fiercely. The map cannon blew up Chu Hanyan, who was pretending to be dead. Chu Hanyan didn't care about pretending to be dead. Chu Hanyan turned to glare at concubine Hu Yu and said angrily, "You, don't talk nonsense, who is a nympho? You have not. Then why are you so honest? How about another man come here and let me see if you can still be so honest, just like the irritated little daughter-in-law of the landlord's family. Aren't you a nymphomaniac?" Concubine Hu Yu looked disdainfully, and Chu Hanyan was so angry that she couldn't even utter a word. Lin Fan was not angry either. Concubine Hu Yu was a very interesting woman, with wild nature, and he was very interested. Those girls at home were too. It's a bit too much for him when he's enthusiastic. It's better to be wild and resist, he. What are you laughing at? He smiles so evilly, he must have no good intentions and is full of bad intentions. Concubine Hu Yu couldn't free herself from Lin Fan's arm, so she turned to glare at Lin Fan and tried to show off her verbal power. Raising her eyebrows, Lin Fan raised his hand and slapped Concubine Hu Yu's strong pussy. The elasticity is so great, as expected of a killer, this meat is as solid as porcelain. Concubine Hu Yu's hair exploded instantly after being slapped by Lin Fan. "How dare you spank me, but I'll fight with you!" Concubine Hu Yu shouted fiercely, but she was imprisoned by the space. It was difficult for her to move her fingers. The most she could do was to look at her fiercely. In fact, it did not cause any substantial harm to Lin Fan at all. On the contrary, Lin Fan felt very interesting. He kept holding on. The more fierce she screamed, the happier he slapped her. After more than 10 slaps in a row, Concubine Hu Yu became honest and stopped scolding her. She stared at Lin Fan with her eyes. "Stop scolding. Snort. If you have the ability, let me go and let's fight each other. What kind of man do you think you are with such crooked abilities? Do you want to try if I am a man? What you said, why don't you compare poetry with scholars?" Concubine Hu Yu was at a loss for words for a moment, being blocked by Lin Fan. Anyway, she was suffering from old age. "Look, you have nothing to say, right? I used my strengths to defeat you, so why did I do it wrongly? If you have the ability, you can use the same ability to defeat me." Concubine Hu Yu. "I'm so angry when I step on a horse. If I had this ability, I could twist your head off in minutes." Concubine Hu Yu yelled madly in her heart. She has learned to be smart now. If she curses out loud, she will be beaten. In this case, then curse in her heart. The effect is the same anyway. Snapped. After being attacked, Concubine Hu Yu couldn't help it anymore. She glared at Lin Fan and screamed, "Why are you hitting me again? You scolded me in your heart." Concubine Hu Yu. "You're such a fool, just be a human being. It's obvious that you want to hit me." Bang. "Ah. I am going to kill you. I didn't scold you but you hit me. I'll fight you." Lin Fan looked calm, even suppressing a smile. "I'm sorry, I couldn't hold it back and I hit you. I'm sorry, I just wanted to hit you and I couldn't hold it back. Doomsday, I am the only one in the world who has superpowers." Author, Doomsday. Chapter 224. Chapter 224, The terrifying power of time, with a single stroke of the knife, cut away the century-old time. Downstairs of the Baiwan Business Building, a space door appeared out of thin air, followed by Lin Fan, who walked out first, followed by Chu Han, who had a dizzy face. Smoke, and finally Concubine Hu Yu, who looked angry and had trouble walking. Although Lin Fan had deliberately controlled his strength, he was probably a little swollen after being slapped for more than 10 times. "Go ahead, let's see how you are beaten to death, and then we will dance on your grave." Staring at Lin Fan's back, Concubine Hu Yu kept thinking, even though she knew that the trash upstairs could not do anything to Lin Fan. She knew one thing very well: good people do not live long, and disasters after living for 1,000 years, Lin Fan is so bad. Since he knows the specific strength of Baiwan business building and still dares to come here, it proves that Lin Fan has absolute confidence. Seeing Lin Fan's weird abilities and this space channel in front of him, so far she has discovered two abilities, one is vines, and the other is the current space. It is estimated that it will be very difficult to kill Lin Fan. You scolded me again, you cursed me to death, and you wanted to dance on my grave. I heard you. I will mark you 10 more times on the other side after I finish my work. Concubine Hu Yu. What the hell are you doing with your ears? Are you a dog? Thinking of 10 more blows on the other side, she is already feeling a little achy. Why can't she control this one? Looking at her with pity. After looking at Concubine Hu Yu, Chu Hanyan felt refreshed and told you to scold me before. Concubine Hu Yu wanted to kick Chu Hanyan in the face now. How could she have been so blind before that she wanted to run away with Chu Hanyan? Especially when this guy was infected, she was still very sad. Women are all big pig hooves. He raised his head and glanced at the Baiwan business building, which was hundreds of meters high in front of him. Lin Fan shook his hand and used a tang knife. Appearing in the hand, on the tang dao's blade, the power of time is flowing slowly. Although the power of time is not very effective against zombies, for humans, the power of time is called a bug. If it was at the beginning, Lin Fan suddenly took out a tang sword. Concubine Hu Yu would still be surprised. Now, let alone a tang sword, she wouldn't be surprised even if Lin Fan pulled out a nuclear bomb now. That's it? Pushing open the door of Baiwan business building, Lin Fan walked in and was greeted by a zombie. This zombie was wearing a police uniform and its face had been scratched to pieces by cat claws. Careful. Looking at the zombies rushing over, Concubine Hu Yu opened fire subconsciously. After saying this, she wanted to give herself a big ear scraper. Why can't she control this bug? Isn't it good to let the zombies bite Lin Fan? Although she will definitely not be infected. Well, at least he helped her get a little revenge. Lin Fan was not anxious at all, and even took the time to turn around and glance at Concubine Hu Yu, with a joking look in his eyes. After reading it, under Chu Hanyan's worried eyes, Tang Dao made a light stroke. This zombie was not the only one in the hall on the first floor. Lin Fan kept advancing, and the zombies that rushed towards him fell at his feet. Concubine Hu Yu, who was following Lin Fan, had a solemn face. She was now there is a strange feeling. Those zombies obviously ran very fast and almost caught Lin Fan, but I don't know why, every time they were a little closer, not a little closer, but they seemed to be a lot worse. Every time Lin Fan can do it just right, and kill the zombies with one knife. It seems slow, but it seems incredibly fast. It feels like playing in slow motion, but it is ridiculously fast. In short, it looks very strange, this bizarre feeling. Concubine Hu Yu found it incredible. Her intuition told her that this might be another ability of Lin Fan, but she couldn't figure out what the specific ability was. It was like there was a layer of veil between them, vague, but she could see life and death. The feeling was like 100 little mice clawing at her heart, which made Concubine Hu Yu feel a little irritable. Chu Hanyan next to her was much better, staring at Lin Fan with a pair of eyes. He never moved away, occasionally shaking his head. A trace of disappointment flashed in his eyes, and then he cheered up again, and the process started over and over again. After getting rid of the zombies on the first floor, he took Chu Hanyan and Hu Yu Fei to the stairs. Lin Fan was just about to go up the stairs. The door opened, but unexpectedly, the stair door opened by itself, and then a figure jumped out. Lin Fan didn't even think about it, he went up and struck with the knife. The tang knife slashed past, but there was no separation of the corpses as expected, and the tang knife as if standing on the air, it passed directly over the figure in front of them. This bizarre sight made Chu Hanyan and Hu Yu Fei open their eyes wide, and their eyes were filled with incredible looks. But they had seen it before. The power of this knife is absolutely real. The heads of zombies were cut off instantly. How come it was like cutting on the shadow of the man in front of me? Not to mention concubine Hu Yu and Chu Hanyan. Just now Wu Zhan was stunned when he rushed out of the stairwell. What happened just now? He saw a knife slashing down as soon as he came out. He only saw a flash of light and had no time to react. Then the knife was like a fake. Just like that, it passed through his body. Wu Zhan subconsciously touched his shoulder. Wu Zhan couldn't come to his senses. There was indeed no wound. Could it be that the knife was fake? Wu Yan and several burly men came out behind him. I was also confused. What happened just now? Wu Zhang was about to speak when he suddenly felt weak and heavy, as if filled with lead. The pistol in his hand seemed to weigh 1,000 kilograms. Bang! The pistol that he could not hold firmly fell to the ground. Wu Zhan staggered a few times, almost lost his balance and collapsed to the ground. Looking down at his hands, Wu Zhan was confused. The skin was shriveled and full of age spots, and the old hands were as dry as skeleton claws. Are these his hands? How is that possible? He is only in his 30s now, in his prime. But what is going on in front of him? Wu Zhan's head was in chaos. He felt that his thinking speed was very slow, like a decaying machine. Horror. Seeing Wu Zhan in front of her transform from a prime man into a haggard old man with sunken eye sockets and cloudy eyes in less than 2 seconds, concubine Hu Yu felt boundless chills and panic in her heart. Now she finally understood where the weird feeling before came from. The thin veil was lifted, and she understood. She finally understood what ability Lin Fan used. The power of time. One of the most mysterious and terrifying abilities. No one can conquer time, everyone will decay under the passage of time, but the man in front of me is an exception. He has mastered the terrifying power called time. He is conquering time. She now finally understood why the zombies almost caught Lin Fan every time, and why Lin Fan's movements seemed so slow, like an old lady doing Tai Chi, but she could kill the zombies every time. Death, the reason for all this is because of time. Accelerating your own time and delaying the time of the zombies creates a certain visual impact. Although it is very slow, you can kill the zombies in no time. It is obvious that the zombies move very fast, but they are always just a tiny bit short of catching them. Come to Lin Fan. Is it actually just that small of a difference? No. The difference is infinite. As long as Lin Fan doesn't want to be caught, he can slow down the zombies' time infinitely. Even if it's just 1 millimeter, the zombies will never catch Lin Fan. After understanding Lin Fan's ability, concubine Hu Yu had indescribable shock in her eyes. Time and space, the two most mysterious and powerful powers, she saw in Lin Fan. She finally understood why Lin Fan with such courage, he dared to ignore hundreds of well-equipped enemies. With two of the strongest abilities in hand, Lin Fan does have the capital. He even said that as long as Lin Fan doesn't want to, no one or anything can touch him. The sword that Lin Fan struck just now seemed to have caused no harm, as if it had struck a shadow. In fact, the sword struck not a person, but time. That sword cut off Wu Zhan's decades, turning him from a prime man into an old man about to be buried. This kind of power was so terrifying. In just 1 or 2 seconds, decades of time were cut off. How terrifying is this? Who dares to face this knife? Wu Zhan's miserable condition was not only witnessed by Chu Hanyan and concubine Hu Yu. Seeing his own brother grow old and almost die in an instant, Wu Yan was stunned, and then, endless anger rose in his heart. Kaka. With the bullet loaded, Wu Yan pointed his gun at Lin Fan and roared, "You bastard, what did you do? I'll give you 3 seconds to restore my brother to normal, otherwise your head will explode like a rotten watermelon. Fire, trust me. You can't swing the knife as fast as I can shoot." Also making the same move were a dozen burly men behind Wu Yan, all with their guns pointed at Lin Fan's head. Appreciating the masterpiece in front of him, Lin Fan was very satisfied. The effect of the power of time was indeed terrifying, especially when used on people. It was simply a bug. A man in his 30s or 40s, in less than 2 seconds, turned into an old man who was almost buried. Looking up at the furious Wu Yan, Lin Fan raised his eyebrows with a disdainful smile. Another cerebral palsy who wants to compete with him to see who is faster. He really doesn't take the pistol seriously. 3. Buzz. The bright silver sword light turned, and the Tang sword passed through Wu Yan's body like a phantom. Lin Fan took 2 steps lightly as if taking a walk, waved his arms twice casually, and then stood back to the same place. Dang dang dang. Plop. 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 More than a dozen pistols fell to the ground with a clear sound, followed immediately by more than a dozen old bodies swaying and falling to the ground. Some people had already died of old age when they fell to the ground, while some people were lying on the ground, muddy. He looked at Lin Fan with blank, frightened and desperate eyes. Looking down at Wu Yan who was lying on the ground, Lin Fan shook his head. It looks like I'm faster. After saying that, Lin Fan stepped over Wu Yan and others and walked into the stairwell. Chu Hanyan reacted and looked at the old corpses on the ground. While he was scared in his heart, there was also deep admiration in his eyes. He looked at Lin Fan's back and hurriedly chased after him with small steps. At the end, Chu Hanyan looked at Wu Yan and others who had died of old age and shook his head slightly, feeling unspeakable sadness in his heart. Who gave you the courage to compete with a person who has the ability to time? What's the difference between this and giving for free? Sure enough, the ignorant are fearless. Doomsday, I am the only one in the world who has superpowers. Author, Doomsday. Chapter 225. Chapter 225 Concubine Who You is so angry. Chu Hanyan transformed into a Superman in seconds and solved Wu Yan and others. Lin Fan went all the way upstairs. There was no one on the 7 or 8 floors in a row. Lin Fan did not stop. His thoughts spread and he went straight to the 11th floor. In the perception, from the 11th floor only then did people exist. Lin Fan didn't feel anything bad after reaching the 11th floor. Concubine Who You could still hold on, but Chu Hanyan was really in trouble. After running around for half the night without eating anything and fighting zombie cats, she almost exhausted all her energy. Now she has climbed 11 floors. She has really reached her limit. Even if Lin Fan hadn't cleared her of the zombie virus, the participating wood element energy replenished her vitality, and she couldn't even climb a few floors before she was about to collapse from exhaustion. Her heart and lungs were burning. Looking at Lin Fan walking in front, Chu Hanyan felt as if her breasts were filled with lead, and her breath was breathing fire. She had been persisting, but now she couldn't hold on any longer. The steps in front of her all shaking. Concubine Who You hugged the shaky Chu Hanyan and said with concern, "Don't go, stop. If you go any further, you won't be going upstairs, but to the palace of hell. I'll stay with you here." No, after getting along for a long time, Concubine Who You felt more like a sister to Chu Hanyan. Seeing that Chu Hanyan was so uncomfortable, she couldn't help but speak. Lin Fan turned around and looked at Chu Hanyan. Only then did Lin Fan realize that Chu Hanyan and Concubine Who You were still following him. Concubine Who You was fine after a long period of exercise, but Chu Hanyan's physical fitness was not so good. "Why don't you just wait for me here? I'll be down soon." Chu Hanyan's face turned pale. She glanced at Lin Fan in despair, lowered her head and shook her head gently. I'm fine, I can still go." Concubine Who You rolled her eyes in anger. Can't she be more angry? How humble do you have to be? Unexpectedly, Chu Hanyan was still stubborn. Seeing her gritting her teeth and holding onto the handrail to continue walking, Lin Fan shook his head and he took out a porcelain bottle and threw it gently. The porcelain bottle flew out of thin air in front of Chu Hanyan. Eat it so you can keep up. Looking at the porcelain bottle flying in front of him, Chu Hanyan took it in his hand and vaguely saw the 4 words Source Power Crystal written on the bottle. Chu Hanyan didn't know what these 4 words meant, and didn't know much about it. Thinking about it, she pulled out the stopper and raised her head to eat the bottle. It was as soft as eating gummy candy. Seeing Chu Hanyan raising her head and eating the contents of the bottle, concubine Hu Yu felt a twinge of pain in her heart. Aren't you afraid that there is poison in it? Or some kind of happy water or something? Can your child be more careful? Concubine Hu Yu had a look of hatred on her face, and she felt like an old mother who had her heart broken. The rich power of the source power crystal was already running in her body. Chu Hanyan grasped the porcelain bottle tightly in her hand, shook her head and said he won't harm me. What I mean is that there is no need for him to harm me. No, I mean, my mother is his woman, he will not harm me, and I can feel that my body is getting better, and I can also feel that I am getting stronger. Concubine Hu Yu sighed, looking much more decadent. Looking at Chu Hanyan, she didn't know what to say. Good guy, how good are you at self-hypnosis? Can you still feel yourself? Are you getting stronger? Why didn't you say you were going to become an immortal? Why is there no need to harm you? I think you want people to be a little crooked towards you, right? From Chu Hanyan, concubine Hu Yu refreshed her understanding of female liquors she knows. In the past, she has seen people give their best friends to their boyfriends to please them. It's like sisters working together. She has also seen people who can't walk when they see handsome guys. She has also seen people who are handsome and it doesn't matter no matter how hard they try. Yes, but Chu Hanyan. Forget it, let's not mention it anymore. If I talk about it too much, I'll be in tears. Concubine, I really feel like I am getting stronger, really. I'm not lying to you. I seem to have endless strength now, and there seems to be something running inside my body, it's like something like internal strength, really. Chu Hanyan's face was full of excitement. His pale face quickly became dizzy under the replenishment of massive vitality. He danced excitedly, without looking weak at all. He even jumped 3 feet high. With a little more strength, he jumped up the steps. They all left a shallow footprint. Concubine Hu Yu thought Chu Hanyan was teasing her at first, but when she saw Chu Hanyan jumping 1 meter high on the spot, everyone was stunned, especially when she looked at the figure on the steps. The footprints a few millimeters deep are starting to make me doubt life. WTF? Are these steps made of paper? Could it be that he is acting like her? Subconsciously, he raised his foot and stamped on the steps. He was sure that they were solid and she couldn't step on them. The kind that moves, but what's going on with Chu Hanyan? Is everything you just said true? Just eat the stuff in that little bottle and you will become a Superman? The steps of Baiwan Business Building are made of reinforced concrete. To be able to make a small hole in such a strong step is like a little Superman. Before that, she knew how much Chu Hanyan weighed, and all these changes only happened after eating the contents of the bottle. Could it be, is that really good stuff in the bottle? Throwing a tang dao to Chu Hanyan, Lin Fan said try, mobilize the energy in the body, and then use the knife in your hand to unleash it. Looking at the tang dao floating in front of him, Chu Hanyan held the handle of the knife and tried to control the qi in his body as Lin Fan said. Then he waved the tang dao hard, a faint sharp breath flashed through, and everything returned to calm. The first experiment failed. Looking at Chu Hanyan's blank gaze, Lin Fan gestured it doesn't matter, try again. Chu Hanyan was like trying to force a child to grow, getting powerful strength out of thin air, but not knowing how to use it at all. If he had obtained it step by step, his ability must be like using his hands and fingers. To put it bluntly, he has no experience. With Lin Fan's encouragement, Chu Hanyan nodded and began to mobilize the chi in his body again as Lin Fan said. This time it was much better than before. As Chu Hanyan slashed hard, a sharp sword chi broke through the air. He came out and instantly slashed at the wall in front. The sharp sword energy was astonishingly powerful, cutting a half-meter long crack in the wall, and you could even see the severed steel bars inside the wall. Concubine Huyu was dumbfounded. Isn't this the end of the world? Why did you suddenly become martial arts style? What the hell is the sword energy? And this destructive power is outrageous, right? What the hell? Why don't you just have something to eat? Is it really a big deal? After coming back to her senses, Concubine Huyu looked at Lin Fan with eager eyes. Her eyes wanted to tear Lin Fan apart. That, I can't walk anymore, can I, is it also? Lin Fan had a bright smile on his face. Looking at the smile on Concubine Huyu's face, Lin Fan suddenly said with a straight face, sorry, no. Concubine Huyu was dumbfounded and looked at Lin Fan with dull eyes. She didn't come back to her senses for a long time. This is public revenge. This is definitely a public revenge. You. Concubine Huyu looked at you for a long time without saying a word. She wanted to say that Lin Fan favored one over the other, but when she thought about it carefully, what did Chu Hanyan have to do with him? My mother is Lin Fan's woman, so it seems normal to give her something nice, right? What about her? She didn't seem to have anything to do with Lin Fan. It didn't matter. She kept singing the opposite tune all the way. Thinking of this, Concubine Huyu was speechless and choked. Concubine. Concubine. I'm stronger now. Did you see it? See it? Am I right? Internal strength. Did you see it? It's sword energy. Did you see it? Chu Hanyan was as excited as a happy little rabbit, shaking Concubine Huyu's shoulders, so excited. Chu Hanyan was very powerful now, far surpassing Concubine Huyu by an unknown amount. This time shake, Concubine Huyu is sober, and half of her life is almost lost. Good guy, all the bones were almost shattered by her, and she could hear the bones making a shrill scream. Put. Let go. Pain. Concubine Huyu was sweating on her head. It really hurt. Her shoulders were almost crushed by her. She now understood how powerful Chu Hanyan was now. This had indeed improved a lot in the past. It would have been difficult for Chu Hanyan to make her feel pain with his little strength. But now, doesn't she feel a little pain? Her shoulder blades are almost crushed. What are you doing, Julian Whitebone Claw? Even if you become stronger, don't use her to practice. Seeing the cold sweat on Concubine Huyu's head, Chu Hanyan realized that she was too excited and couldn't control her strength. He quickly waved his hand and accidentally hit the armrest with his finger, making a muffled sound, but Chu Hanyan didn't feel it. My hands hurt, but looking at the dents on the armrests, I felt a little better. Not only Chu Hanyan is Fang, but Concubine Huyu is also Fang. Is this person still a human being? A bullet hitting the armrest wouldn't have this destructive effect, would it? At most, there were some sparks and then they ricocheted. I touched it casually. Why? Concubine Huyu grinned for a while. If she had pinched her shoulders with such force just now, she wouldn't be able to speak, and her shoulder blades would be broken. Concubine, are you okay? I didn't mean it, Chu Hanyan also saw his current destructive power. He raised his hand to touch Concubine Huyu's shoulder, as if he wanted to check her. Frightened by Chu Hanyan's action, Concubine Huyu quickly waved her hands and backed away. She looked at Chu Hanyan warily and said, I'm fine, I'm fine. Don't touch me, calm down. Chu Hanyan's hand froze. Mid-air, Chu Hanyan smiled coquettishly, and took his hand back in embarrassment. On the stairs, seeing the two of them like this, Lin Fan shook his head. He had already expected Chu Hanyan's situation. A person suddenly gained a very powerful power, and it was inevitable that he would not be able to control it. If he wanted to control it well, such strength requires a long period of time to get used to. Therefore, although source power crystal is very good, it is not suitable to eat too much in a short period of time. It will cause all kinds of harm and no benefit. It's time to go. You need to get used to the newly acquired power. Don't get too close to Yufei in the short term. After all, some people are as brittle as paper. What if they accidentally snap and break? Manage. Hearing Lin Fan's unceremonious ridicule, concubine Hu Yu raised her head and glared at Lin Fan. Although the words were true, she was curious when she heard them coming from Lin Fan's mouth. This was definitely aimed at her. Absolutely. Chu Hanyan looked a little depressed, and the excitement of having just gained super strength was extinguished in an instant. However, he still cheered up and looked at concubine Hu Yu, and said with a forced smile, "Concubine, don't worry, I will be able to control it soon. It's good to have the power in your body, believe me." After saying that, Chu Hanyan raised his hand and wanted to pat concubine Hu Yu on the shoulder. But as soon as he raised his hand, he thought of something. Seeing concubine Hu Yu subconsciously retreating, she smiled even more helplessly. On the stairs, Lin Fan looked at concubine Hu Yu, who was looking like a thief, and almost burst into laughter. This was so interesting. Hearing the whisper, concubine Hu Yu turned her head and glared at Lin Fan. If she couldn't beat him, she would go up and fight with Lin Fan right now. Fight? It's too much. Stopping his smile, Lin Fan took out a bottle of source power crystal, gestured in concubine Hu Yu's longing eyes, and asked, "Do you want it?" Concubine Hu Yu nodded quickly, no longer caring about her grudge. "I want it." A smile appeared on the corners of his head. Lin Fan felt that he must be smiling like those big villains now, right? Want it? Okay, beg me and I will give it to you. Concubine Hu Yu was stunned. Seeing Lin Fan's evil smile, she gritted her teeth and said bitterly, "I won't beg you, even if I, concubine Hu Yu, died here today, I would never beg you to jump from the 11th floor stairs. Give up." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Doomsday, I am the only one in the world who has superpowers. Author, Gugu Da. Chapter 226. Chapter 226, because they were afraid of trouble, they all were killed at the door of the stairs on the 11th floor. Lin Fan put his hand on the door handle of the stairs. The fun was over and it was time to get down to business. Lin Fan opened the door and walked in. In the corridor, some people staying on the 11th floor noticed the open stair door and raised their guns warily, pointing their guns at the stairs. In extraordinary times, vigilance is necessary. If a zombie cat attack occurs, no one wants to die tragically due to carelessness. Under the watchful eyes of a dozen people left behind, Lin Fan walked out, followed by concubine Hu Yu and Chu Hanyan. Seeing the sudden appearance of Lin Fan and 3 people, the dozen or so people in the corridor were a little confused for a moment. Among Wu Zhan's group who went down before, there was no one like Lin Fan at all. Among the 3 people, except for Chu Hanyan, none of them have seen it. There are no survivors below the 11th floor. Where did Chu Hanyan and these 2 strange men and women come from? There are people staying on every floor. It is impossible to put down the survivors upstairs. What happened to these 3 people? With a flick of his finger, dozens of blue lightnings flashed through, and the heads of everyone in the corridor were penetrated. A burning smell was emitted, and their lifeless bodies fell backwards. Plop, plop. There was a continuous muffled sound. Lin Fan turned his head and looked at Chu Hanyan, whose eyes were wide open and his expression was astonished. His eyes turned to concubine Hu Yu. Apart from the previous madness, this female killer was very quiet now and had no symptoms at all. I was frightened by the sight before me. With a casual move, some firearms that fell next to the corpse flew over. Lin Fan placed these firearms in front of concubine Huyu, looked at her slightly confused eyes, and said, "Take it, your mission is to kill all these. Are there any problems with all the men on the floor?" Concubine Huyu was stunned and looked at Lin Fan in surprise. She didn't expect that Lin Fan would give her such an order to kill all the men. This man's heart is so cruel. Picking up the pistol in front of her, concubine Huyu checked the ammunition in the pistol. There was plenty of ammunition. She casually pinned the pistols on her hot pants. Lin Fan didn't even understand what was going on, but found that more than 10 guns had been used. Concubine Yu has arranged everything. The small hot pants are full of pistols hidden inside and outside, and there are even 2 rounds of magazines tied to the white crotch. This is so showy. Kaka. She took out the magazine skillfully and took a look. Concubine Huyu touched her hands and returned the magazine to the slot. The barrels of the 2 pistols collided and the bullets were loaded. The familiar look made Lin Fan stunned. Bright. Things like guns have different feelings in the hands of different people. Some people hold guns for a deterrent effect at best, while some people can use guns to their advantage, as if they are showing off. Same as art. Holding 2 guns in hand, concubine Huyu looked into Lin Fan's eyes and asked, "Are you sure? You want me to kill all the men on the entire floor? Are you kidding me? When it comes to business, I never joke." Concubine Huyu nodded, chuckled, passed Lin Fan, walked to the door of the nearest room, raised her hand and shot. Bang! The door handle was smashed. Concubine Huyu raised her foot and kicked the door down. Open, there were bursts of screams inside. Before the people inside could see clearly what was going on at the door, bullets flew out from the muzzle of the gun, hitting everyone accurately between the eyebrows. The gunshot was piercing. Huyu the concubine kept pulling the trigger, and a large amount of blood splashed in the room. After a while, the sound in the room completely subsided. They were all dead. More than 10 men in the room were dead, not a single one was left alive, and the blood was everywhere. After doing all this, concubine Huyu's face remained unchanged, as if she was not the one who had just killed more than 10 people. Step by step, she walked to the second door, and with almost the same movements as before, she opened the door. He broke the doorknob, kicked open the door, and then opened fire. The number of concubine Huyu's movements and the expressionless expression on her face fully demonstrated the cold side of the killer. Behind Lin Fan, he watched concubine Huyu kicking down the door one by one and shooting. Killing the survivors in the room one by one. Chu Hanyan's eyes were dull, obviously shocked by Lin Fan's order and concubine Huyu's cold blood. It took a long time for Chu Hanyan to wake up. By this time, concubine Huyu had already. It was time to kick open the 7th door. Listening to the sudden rapid breathing behind him, Lin Fan asked without looking back, "Are you surprised? Do you think concubine Huyu and I are cold-blooded? One dares to issue such an order, while the other dares to do so." Chu Hanyan looked at her toes, shook her head and said, "I don't think so. There must be a reason for you to do this." "That's probably it." "The reason?" Lin Fan pondered for a moment. "There is no reason. If I have to say it, it is that I want to kill all these men. This can save a lot of trouble. For example, I will take away those women later. These men are they might jump out to stop them, so I might as well kill them all now to save myself a lot of trouble." I never expected that the reason why Lin Fan took action was because he was afraid of trouble. This reason. Chu Hanyan didn't know what to say. Looking at the figure of concubine Huyu walking back and forth in front of her, Lin Fan felt that this woman was really good. She had strong personal strength, was decisive and ruthless, had high obedience to orders, and was very wild. She was worthy of being in the killer circle. All conditions satisfied him. Chu Hanyan beside him was more like a flower in a greenhouse. Apart from the courage to face death before, Lin Fan didn't see many advantages in her. Maybe it was because concubine Hu Yu was so good. The light was so bright that it covered up Chu Hanyan. There were constant gunshots on the 11th floor, and Lin Fan could faintly hear some begging for mercy and shouts, but the consequences faced by these people were nothing more than bullets shot by concubine Hu Yu. I don't know if the gunshots were too regular, or if those people were wailing loudly before they died. Some survivors who were huddled in the room opened the door and rushed out. Seeing these people, Lin Fan simply waved his hand, and there were streaks of lightning. Shoot these men. Concubine Hu Yu turned her head and glanced at the body lying on the ground, then looked at Lin Fan, without saying anything, and continued to repeat what she had done before. The 11th floor was quickly cleared. Concubine Hu Yu threw away the empty pistol in her hand and took out 2 pistols from her hot pants. Looking at concubine Hu Yu approaching, Lin Fan praised, "You are really good. I believe that with me, you will become a blockbuster sooner or later." "Your place?" Concubine Hu Yu thought for a moment and glanced at Chu Hanyan. She remembered what Lin Fan had just given Chu Hanyan to eat. She was very interested in what Chu Hanyan had eaten before. After hearing what Lin Fan said, meaning, there should be many women under him who have eaten this thing. "Yes, you are right, at my place. As long as you work hard, you will get what Hanyan ate before. Sooner or later, many people have eaten it at my place." Lin Fan nodded without hiding it. Concubine Hu Yu is a very strong woman, Lin Fan can see it, but it doesn't matter, no matter how strong she is, she can't escape from his grasp. Human desires are endless, this sentence Lin Fan has always agreed with this, and he doesn't think there is any woman he can't win. Is that so? Suddenly, I am looking forward to your power more and more. I will rely on my own efforts to obtain the kind of food Hanyan eats, having a goal to strive for. Concubine Hu Yu looked high-spirited and her expression was full of excitement. Seeing the confident light on concubine Hu Yu's face, Lin Fan shook his head secretly. She was still too young. "Let's go upstairs. You don't need to do anything this time. I don't plan to waste all my time here today." Although it is pleasant to watch concubine Hu Yu do it, the speed is really slow. It really makes concubine Hu Yu clean up layer by layer. After finishing it, it will be evening. With so much free time, Lin Fan feels that it is better to stay at home. It was so comfortable. Lin Fan and concubine Hu Yu were so engrossed in their chat that Chu Hanyan next to them was very unhappy. He wanted to take the initiative on the next floor to improve his impression in Lin Fan's mind, but he heard Lin Fan say that he would go to the next floor. There was no need for concubine Hu Yu to take action. This made her very disappointed and felt that she had missed the opportunity to perform. Not only that, it might also have left a bad impression on Lin Fan. This not only disappointed Chu Hanyan, but also unspeakable annoyance. She felt like a fool. The Baiwan business building was full of men from the 8th to 15th floors. The appearance of zombie cats made people below the 10th floor either infected into zombies or infected by Wu Zhan and others drove them to the 10th floor. If it weren't for the appearance of the zombie cat, these men might not be alive now. Speaking of which, it was the zombie cat that saved the lives of these men and disrupted the arrangements of Wu Zhan and others. This only then did these men live a little longer. On the 12th floor, Lin Fan stood in the corridor. With a flick of his finger, lightning flashed. More than a dozen men in police uniforms fell to the ground and died. Taking away their firearms, Lin Fan kept walking and headed straight to the 13th floor. Looking at Lin Fan's actions, concubine Hu Yu asked doubtfully, "Are you ignoring those men on the floor?" Glancing at concubine Hu Yu, Lin Fan said as he walked, "There's no rush, there's no need for me to do anything. It would be a waste for them to die like this." "What a waste?" Concubine Hu Yu was a little confused about Lin Fan's thoughts. She touched the dejected Chu Hanyan. Chu Hanyan also shook his head and expressed that he was unclear. Lin Fan's idea was very simple. Those men who killed him seemed to it doesn't make any sense. It's better to take away those women and put the zombies in. Won't these people turn into zombies by then? After turning into zombies, you can get experience and points by killing them. On the contrary, they are in their normal state now. Kill a few, there are no benefits. Lin Fan doesn't want to bother. Clear out the people left behind on each floor, collect the weapons, and go to the next floor without stopping. As long as these people with weapons are killed, the remaining men will be the zombies' dinner. There will definitely be no accidents. This method is simple and fast. Lin Fan quickly arrived at the 16th floor, and from here on, the floors above were all women, until the 24th floor, and from the 25th floor, it was Wu Zhan. Those subordinates lived on the floors up to the 32nd floor of the top floor. Lin Fan knew this from concubine Hu Yu and Chu Hanyan. The population base of the entire Baiwan business building was very large, close to 5,000, and the ratio of men to women was almost the same. Compared with one, that is to say, the number of women is more than 2,000. When they arrived on the 16th floor, a dozen unlucky guards were killed by Lin Fan without even understanding the situation. They even died without understanding what happened to them. He's dead. They don't even know who killed him. Go and knock on the door one by one and call all the women out. Doomsday, I am the only one in the world who has superpowers. Author, Doomsday. Chapter 227. Chapter 227. Good words can't persuade the damn ghosts. If you want to die, I will help you. Go and knock on the door one by one and call all the women out. After Lin Fan said this, Chu Hanyan's eyes lit up, and his whole body seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. He reflexively rushed out with the tang knife. The strong wind caused by the speed blew up Hu Yu's dark golden long hair. Her hair was flying in all directions. She smoothed her hair out helplessly and looked at Chu Hanyan, who rushed out excitedly. Concubine Hu Yu didn't know how to complain. You can't be a licker. Be sensible. The nearest room is at the door. Chu Hanyan swung his tang dao and struck at the door handle. The sharp blade was still filled with traces of sword energy. Seeing Chu Hanyan mobilize his troops in such a way and use his sword energy, everyone in Lin was stunned. So stupid. Calm down, what I'm saying is, call the women out, you know what I mean. Lin Fan was a little panicked. Don't get excited. He kicked in the door and chopped off all the women. That's not what he meant. Chu Hanyan was stunned for a moment when the tang knife was gathered above his head. Hearing Lin Fan's words, he just woke up a little, but he didn't move slowly, and he immediately opened the door lock. Bang! Kicked the door open. Chu Hanyan's posture was indescribably tough. Standing at the door of the room, looking at the blank stares inside, Tang Dao pointed at everyone inside and shouted, "Get out of here!" Beside Lin Fan, the black line on concubine Hu Yu's head, who had not yet moved, looked at the child. She shook her head and walked to the other side helplessly, but compared to Chu Hanyan, concubine Hu Yu's behavior was not much better. Bang! Breaking the door lock with one shot and kicking open the door. Looking at the frightened women inside, concubine Hu Yu swept her cold gaze and said in a cold voice, "If you don't want to be shot, just get out." Under the threat of Chu Hanyan and concubine Hu Yu, no woman dared to say a word, and they all walked out of the room. Not long after, all the women on the 16th floor were felt in the corridor, and soon in the long corridor the place was full of women. After driving all the women out, concubine Hu Yu and Chu Hanyan walked back to Lin Fan. Looking at these women, Lin Fan had nothing to say. His index finger traced the space in front of him, and a dark line appeared. The space passage appeared in the corridor. Looking at the sudden appearance of the space passage, many women did not know what it was. Concubine Hu Yu and Chu Hanyan, who had only met once, were not too surprised. After all, I have already walked through it once, but I just don't know where the space passage leads to this time. Seeing the doubtful and frightened eyes of the women in the corridor, Lin Fan pointed to the space door in front of him and said, "Maybe you don't know this, what is it? I can tell you that this is a space passage. At the other end of the space passage is the power I have established. Now all you need to do is walk in. Do you understand?" The women in the corridor had different expressions on their faces, including shock, confusion, anger, disdain, etc. "Why should we listen to you? Do you want us to go in? That is, why should we go to your power? Can you guarantee our safety? Simply whimsical. Crazy? Are we going to do whatever you say? Who do you think you are?" A series of discordant voices came from the corridor. There were too many people in the corridor and the corridor was too long. It was impossible to find out who was talking for a while. Some timid women had already taken steps. "Listen." Hearing these discordant sounds, he took back his steps and looked to the left and right. He was a little confused for a moment, not knowing what to do. Next to Lin Fan, hearing these strange sounds, Chu Han Smoke, his little face was wrinkled, and there was indescribable anger in his eyes. Whoever is talking has the ability to stand up and say it in front of me. Chu Hanyan is still too young. At this time, even a fool knows not to stand up. What's the matter? Why don't you let people talk? It would be great to have a knife. That is, who are you trying to scare with a knife? Show off your power, right? You just bully us compatriots. Why don't you slash zombies with a knife? Why are you showing off to us? This is the kind of person who bullies the weak and is afraid of the strong. Not only did no one stand up, but there were even more sarcastic voices in the crowd. The situation in the corridor fell into a deadlock for a while. Some people even saw this situation and started waving flags and shouting. Chu Hanyan was the first. This was the first time I had experienced this kind of thing, and I didn't know what to do for a while. Pulling Chu Hanyan's arm, Concubine Hu Yu shook her head at her, looking at her confused and angry look, and turned in Lin Fan's direction. She gestured. Chu Hanyan looked at Lin Fan. What surprised her was that Lin Fan didn't have the slightest hint of anger on his face. Instead, he was very calm. She was so calm that she found it incredible. She didn't understand that Lin Fan wasn't angry at all. Is it? Isn't Lin Fan angry? No, it's just that we have encountered this situation too many times, and there are too many so-called people. If he had been angry every time, he would have been mad to death. These women in Baiwan business building, unlike the women in other survivor gathering places, these women have obviously not been oppressed and have even lived a very comfortable life. It is normal for these women to not be able to see the reality. In fact, Lin Fan is not convinced by Wu Zhan's method of rule. I agree, there is nothing wrong with Wu Zhan's ruling method, but the mistake is that it was used in the wrong era. This is not ancient times, this is modern times, and what we are facing is not troubled times, but a deadly zombie crisis. How are these people used to this? What's the use? How about raising an uncle? This situation reminded Lin Fan of a plot in a certain anime, that is, the Joukeng house in School Apocalypse. The survivors in the Joukeng house are similar to the women in front of him. In the apocalypse, the last thing he needs is kindness and tolerance. Any clown who dares to jump out and cause trouble shall be damned. The so-called tolerance is just a frame given by him. Within this frame, is the tolerance he can tolerate. To go beyond this limit is to challenge the bottom line. This kind of behavior that challenges the bottom line has only one result. That is death. For women who dare to challenge His Majesty, what Lin Fan likes to do most is to kill. Kill them to the point of death. Han killed them until they cried for their fathers. Killed them until they were frightened and despaired. Then, without giving them any chance to repent, he mercilessly waved the butcher knife and ended their lives. Don't you want to go in? Or do you want to go in? Or do you all agree with what those stinking rat bitches are saying? Lin Fan's calm look and calm tone made many women a little uneasy. These women are not all fools. Lin Fan can come here and show this hand. He is obviously capable. They don't know how to disobey Lin Fan. What will be the outcome? His too calm expression and tone made many women uneasy. In the crowd, Lin Meifeng's nose was almost crooked with anger. A stinky rat with his head and tail exposed. A bitch? This is simply unbearable, even ants can't bear it. What age are we in and are you still chauvinistic? The most annoying thing is this kind of straight male cancer. If you don't obey, you will be a stinky rat and a bitch. We women really can't get on the stage. Does freedom of speech not allow people to speak? It's so overbearing, we're all going to be scared to death. We are living a good life here, why should we go with you? Who do you think you are? President. We have to listen to everything you say? We women hold up half the sky, do we respect women anymore? Listening to the clamor from the crowd, Lin Fan didn't say any more nonsense. He raised his hand and pointed at the space passage in front of him. You can choose to go in or stay. If you want to go in, you can leave now. If you don't want to go in, I will do the same. I won't force you. My patience is limited. If no one moves after 10 seconds, I will default to your choice to stay. In the corridor, looking at the dark space passage in front of Lin Fan, time went backwards second by second. 10 seconds was very short. At the beginning, no one moved. After 5 seconds, someone finally couldn't help it. Raised her head and walked towards Lin Fan. In the crowd, Lin Meifeng looked at Lin Fan bitterly and said sharply, have you thought about it? It might be hell after you enter, so think carefully. Lin Meifeng's voice was so loud that the women who set out hesitated. No one was sure what would happen in the future. Maybe it was just as Lin Meifeng said, what about the dark life on the other side of the space passage? Lin Fan raised his eyebrows and sighed. Do you think you are cheap or not? I didn't even plan to deal with you so early, you have to dance non-stop. After saying that, Lin Fan grabbed it casually. In the crowd, Lin Meifeng was shocked. She found that she couldn't move. She lost control of her whole body. Then she found that she was flying up, clinging to the top of the corridor, flying all the way towards Lin Fan. Bumped into some lampshades along the way, hitting her head and bleeding, and she screamed miserably, flew until he was near Lin Fan, and then fell from the air. Boom. Click. Ah. It hurts me so much, you bastard. Brute. Prostitute. Click. He raised his foot and kicked Lin Meifeng's shoulder to pieces. The severe pain interrupted her curses. Seeing this, the women were frightened and backed away. Ignoring Lin Meifeng's screams, Lin Fan raised his foot and stepped down again. This time, it was Lin Meifeng's arm bone that was crushed. The screams kept echoing in the corridor. Lin Fan raised his head and looked at the scared women in the corridor. Whispered, you still have 3 seconds to decide whether to go in. The women in the corridors on both sides were panicked. At this time, they couldn't think about it at all, and hurriedly ran towards the space door. Seeing the swarming figures of women, Lin Fan raised his kick and kicked it again. This time it was Lin Meifeng's spine, which made a clicking sound. Lin Meifeng's sharp roar made the women tremble all over. They ran so fast under their feet that they wished their parents could. 2 more babies were born. 3. In the frightened eyes of the women, Lin Fan read out a number. An ominous premonition arose in the hearts of the women who were running towards the space passage. Then, they saw a scene that made them despair. They raised their arms. From there, a translucent sword light appeared out of thin air. As Lin Fan waved his hand, the translucent sword light shot out instantly. It quickly expanded in mid-air to be as wide as the corridor, and then slashed towards the back half of the corridor. No. Don't want. No. We don't want to die. You are not trustworthy. You said there are still 3 seconds, but you clearly said there are still 3 seconds. Sharp screams came out from the women's mouths. Dozens and hundreds of women screamed at the same time. The voices were extremely cruel, but the sword light would not stop because of their fear. The terrifying sword light slashed. After that, blood splattered and filled the air. The upper body that was cut in half flew up with a look of horror on its face. The lower body that lost control ran a certain distance before falling to the ground. The women who were lucky enough to escape they were so frightened that they burst into tears, and many of them even became incontinent. They crawled into the space passage like crazy, not daring to even look behind them. He took back his hand and looked at the women on the ground who were still alive. Lin Fan, he said disdainfully, do you need to be trustworthy to you bitches who are just worried about the world being in chaos? Do you think I don't know who was forcing lie in the dark before? Good words can't persuade the damn ghosts. If you want to die, I will make it happen for you. Doomsday, I am the only one in the world who has superpowers. Author, Doomsday. Chapter 228. Chapter 228. Chu Hanyan, if I were an honest person, I wouldn't have any unreasonable thoughts. Some people are just mean people. They belong to the category of donkey. They have to be beaten before they can be led away. You must be nice and angry. They think you have a bad temper. When they were bullied, they started to hit them on the nose and face. They had to hit them until they hurt, and then they knew who was the father. Just like these women in front of you, you didn't cherish the opportunity you were given before. Now that you are about to die, you start begging for mercy and regretting it. The question is it useful? If I'm sorry, what do you need the police for? If sorry is useful, why do we need the law? Don't say there is no law in the end of the world. Lin Fan is the law now. A sword energy slashed through, and corpses and blood flowed everywhere in the corridor. All the women who were still giggling before were beheaded by Lin Fan. As for whether there were innocent people who were killed by mistake, for this kind of thing, Lin Fan, there is only one sentence: if you die, you will die in vain. This kind of fence-sitting group, killing one is never too many, and killing two is never too few. These women behind are the closest, and it is impossible not to know who the speaker is. Instead of staying away, they stay behind, and their intentions are obvious. This kind of waiting and watching even has the nature of shielding. Lin Fan has always killed everyone. The corridor instantly became much quieter. Only Lin Meifeng at Lin Fan's feet was still howling miserably. Lin Fan had zero tolerance for this thorn. Since you want to be a standout so much, then I'll give you the treatment of a standout. Let you know what is the truth, that if a tree is beautiful in the forest, it will be destroyed by the wind. You like to bark, don't you? I'll let you scream enough today. With a ruthless look in his eyes, Lin Fan raised his foot and stomped it down again, this time on the forearm bone. Lin Fan's strength was very steady, and he was sure to crush it all with one kick. Ah! I fuck you. Boom. Concubine Hu Yu was upset when she heard this and kicked her over. Lin Meifeng's mouth was covered with blood and she spat out teeth and pieces of meat. Go, there are dozens of people over there, leave it to you. The corridor was divided into two ends. Lin Fan only killed the women on the left. There were still some women on the right who were fixed in place by Lin Fan and could not move even if he wanted to move. Lin Fan did not have the habit of repaying evil with kindness. He even had a strong murderous intention. These women did not know whether to live or die. Then let them know how to write the word death. He does only accept maids, but not all of them, some damn ones. He will never be lenient. There are so many women alive in the world, the devil is the least. There are hundreds of thousands, and at worst there are hundreds of thousands. Isn't this enough? Enough. This is just the magic city. There are too many women in Jinling, Hesheng, Sushi, Chinchi and even the whole country near the Magic City. Moreover, the Demon City is a port city. When we reach the military area, we can take over the North Sea Fleet. Then we can sail across the ocean. The Big Stick Empire and the Neon Empire are all population centers. There is no shortage of women at all, so women are here with her. There are no privileges. He will not be nobler than men. If you still hold on to the same attitude before the doomsday, it is best to carry him directly into the coffin. After regaining consciousness, Chu Hanyan looked at the corridor on the right, where dozens of women were horrified. They maintained all kinds of ridiculous movements, as if they had been cast with a talisman. Their eyes and faces were full of fear and panic. In front of them, there were corpses all over the ground. They all saw them. They saw the women who died tragically were all chopped up by Lin Fan in an understatement. Yes, with a wave of his hand, dozens of women were cut in half. This man is simply a devil. A devil. Killing people without blinking an eye is like trampling to death dozens of ants. This man's calmness was not that he didn't care at all, but that he was watching them coldly, looking at them like clowns. When he had enough of their clown-like performances and ugliness, he came out with a sickle and showed his cruelty. The cold side. This time, Chu Hanyan didn't hesitate at all. She knew that if she wanted to make Lin Fan happy, she had to make a choice. Falling in love was humble. Whoever fell in love first would lose, even if Lin Fan's identity was already destined. It's impossible between them, but there are some things that cannot be thought about rationally. If she does this, Lin Fan will be happy and look up to her. She doesn't mind having her hands stained with blood. This is no longer the peaceful era before, but is full of crises. In the apocalypse where people's hearts are like ghosts, if she doesn't kill someone, she will probably be killed. She will have to adapt to it sooner or later, and this time the target is the women in front of her, making her angry, making her want to kill the women for the first time. Keyboard warriors are hateful. These women are the keyboard warriors who are hiding. They are harsh and vicious in their words. They think that it will be fine just to talk in a crowd. This may have been the case before, but it is different now. They are all going to die. And she needs to decide how to die. Holding Tang Dao and walking towards these women step by step, Chu Hanyan saw it and saw the frightened and pleading eyes of these women, as well as their constant whines. Although these women were immobilized, they opened their mouths to speak, but their vocal cords and other functions were still there. When they saw Chu Hanyan approaching with a knife, they could only make low or sharp whines, hoping that Chu Hanyan would let them go. Unfortunately, Chu Hanyan no. Buzz. He swung the Tang Dao hard, and the blade cut through the air with a low buzz sound. He cut it down with one strike. The woman's arm in front of him was cut off, and blood spurted out. Chu Hanyan wiped the blood on his face. The pretty face is a little more bloody and ruthless. You scolded me very happily just now, aren't you very good at scolding? Keep going. Buzz. The silver sword light flashed by, and Chu Hanyan waved the Tang Dao once every time he said a word. Soon the woman in front of him was cut into a human stick, with only her head still hanging on the body. With a wave of her hand, the woman's body was separated, and Chu Hanyan walked towards the second woman. At the top of the stairs, Lin Fan kicked Lin Meifeng again. This time, it was the bones that were crushed, but now Lin Fan's attention was not on her, but on Chu. On Han Yan. Lin Fan scratched his head when he saw Chu Hanyan stabbing him with just one word. What happened to this girl? Has she turned black? Before Mu Qingxiu, what happened to Chu Hanyan now? Could it be that he has awakened? What kind of talent aura or something? Are the girls around him randomly turning black? But Chu Hanyan looks pretty good like this, much better than before. This kind of personality now is more suitable for surviving in the apocalypse. Lin Fan and concubine Hu Yu, the two of them admired Chu Hanyan's performance together, stepping on Lin Meifeng from time to time, listening to the wailing at her feet, and watching Chu Hanyan slash her swords. Not to mention, the scene was unexpectedly harmonious. Dozens of women, Chu Hanyan called the names one by one, and what he said was not serious. He was cruel and ruthless. No matter how pitiful those women behaved, Chu Hanyan showed no mercy. When Chu Hanyan came back after killing a lot, Lin Fan also ended the life of Lin Meifeng under his feet. All the bones in his body were crushed to pieces. Lin Meifeng's eyes were empty and lifeless when she died. She had already become an idiot in pain. There was no need to continue in this situation, so she simply trampled her to death. Come back. Chu Hanyan lowered her head, and the tang knife in her hand was dripping with blood. Seeing her like this, Lin Fan raised his hand and patted her shoulder, comforting her. This kind of thing will happen sooner or later. I'm used to it. Look at it. You're doing very well. Yes, Han Yan, it is better to be cruel to others in this doomsday than for others to be cruel to you. Concubine Hu Yu was also helping out at this time. It was difficult for her to get over the hurdle for her first time killing someone. She had also experienced it. Especially when faced with those pleading eyes, it was easy for people to be shaken, but not you can be merciful, because you don't know if the other party will stab you to death the next second after you show mercy. Being kind to your enemy is the greatest cruelty to yourself. Is what I'm doing really okay? Raising his head and looking at Lin Fan, Chu Hanyan's negative emotions subsided a lot. The haze was gone. He looked at Lin Fan with eyes full of expectation. He raised his hand and touched the end of Chu Han's cigarette. Lin Fan nodded. Well, you have done very well. At the beginning, I didn't think you would do so well. What I thought was that you would not be able to hold on when you killed the first person, the third, or the fifth one. As a result, you kept killing from beginning to end, and the way you did it was so awesome. It really exceeded my expectations. Is this probably the outburst of honest man? Hearing Lin Fan's praise, Chu Hanyan had a little smile on her face, but the last word about being honest made Chu Hanyan feel a little bit complaining. If she was an honest person, she wouldn't have any evil thoughts. Now, she was not only thinking about it, but also always wanted to replace it. Concubine Hu Yu felt helpless in her heart. She looked at Chu Hanyan and Lin Fan looking at each other, as if they had forgotten that she had such a big job next to them. This is so painful. What does it mean to value sex over friends? This is a typical example of Chu Hanyan. She had obviously comforted her just now, but she was just forgotten like this? What the hell is this? Human. Is this a woman? Concubine Hu Yu dares to say now that she wants. With Lin Fan's look, Chu Hanyan would definitely send him forward. If Lin Fan wanted to deal with her, Chu Hanyan, an unreliable woman, would definitely hug her and prevent her from fighting back. She couldn't help it anymore, she wanted to vomit. Raising her hand and waving it in front of Chu Hanyan's eyes, Concubine Hu Yu pushed her. What made her most speechless was that even this failed to bring Chu Hanyan back to her senses. Come back to your senses. In desperation, Concubine Hu Yu shouted into Chu Hanyan's ear. Chu Hanyan then turned to look at her blankly, as if he had just woken up. What's wrong? Concubine Hu Yu said that she was going to surrender. Goodbye. The next time she cares about Chu, she will be like a dog. The two women looked confused and helpless. Lin Fan looked amused and turned around to walk upstairs. It's time to go. If every floor is the same as here, it will be late at night when we go back today. Glancing at Chu Hanyan, Concubine Hu Yu let out a cold snort of dissatisfaction and quickly chased after Lin Fan. Although she had been fighting with Lin Fan, I have to say that the way Lin Fan just dealt with these women was very handsome. Very cool. Cool. Very decisive. It made her feel very good. It was very enjoyable. especially the sword energy that was swung out casually. She almost trembled when she saw it, but luckily she caught it. Men. They just want to kill decisively and ruthlessly. Ruthless, this is the true nature of a hero, and she likes this type. On the 17th floor, Lin Fan did not speak this time. Chu Hanyan and Hu Yufei consciously went to knock on the door to chase people away, and soon the entire 17th floor, all the women were rushed into the corridor. He opened the space passage casually. Lin Fan made it much easier this time. He raised his hand and snapped his fingers. The space projection appeared above the corridor. The picture was full of corpses, which was even scarier than a horror movie. 100 times the scene. This is the corridor on the 16th floor. I am originally a very kind person and want to give you a life before the end of the world, but some people just won't shed tears until they see the coffin and like to fight me, so they become like this. What do you think? Has it become like this? Looking at the projected scene, the women's backs felt cold and their heads shook like rattles. No. In no mood. Since you don't want to, what are you waiting for? Don't go in yet. Are you waiting for me to invite you? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Doomsday, I am the only one in the world who has superpowers. Author, Doomsday. Chapter 229. Chapter 229 here. This is my kingdom. The two women were shocked. Since you don't want to, what are you waiting for? Don't go in yet. Are you waiting for me to invite you? Lin Fan's words immediately woke up all the women. Although it was not a ferocious shout, it still made them terrified. No one is not afraid of death, especially these women. Under the threat of death, this time no one dared to talk nonsense anymore. Lin Fan was almost scared out of his wits. The picture in the projection was too terrifying. It was like a slaughterhouse, killing people like pigs. And there were women like them everywhere. They were all with broken limbs and arms. When you look at them, not a single corpse is complete. This is the most terrifying thing. The women didn't dare to hesitate at all, as if there was a fire burning behind their butts, they went crazy. Running inside the space passage, after a while, all the women in the corridor disappeared, not a single one was left. 18th floor, 19th floor, 20th floor. It wasn't until there was no more woman in the entire building that Lin Fan stopped. Looking at the space door in front of him, Lin Fan raised his hand and snapped his fingers. The direction of the space passage changed, leading directly to the city gate upstairs of the north gate. Li Yun's position was right at the north city gate. Lin Fan felt that there was a reason for Li Yun's choice. If he had not brought Chu Hanyan back, she, as a mother, would not have given up. Now that Chu Hanyan has been found, it would be good to take her there directly and reunite their mother and daughter. As for concubine Hu Yu, this woman should be left at the north gate and let her improve her strength. This is a good seedling. Lin Fan appreciates it very much. Let's go in and show you my kingdom. Looking at the smile on Lin Fan's face, Chu Han blushed and ran into the space passage with his head lowered. Concubine Hu Yu also had expectations in her heart. She was very curious about Lin Fan's power. She wanted to see it, look at how powerful Lin Fan is and how powerful those subordinates are. She wants to work hard to get something like the great return pill that Chu Hanyan had eaten before. She is eager to become stronger. She watched the two women walk in one after another. Lin Fan smiled slightly and moved his fingers. 2 kilometers away, a huge hole appeared in the wall made of simple scrap cars. The zombies further north that had not been cleaned up rushed in. He looked down. At his feet, Lin Fan had a sneer on his face. Thousands of people were huddled in this building. The smell emitted was as dazzling to the zombies as a beacon in the dark night. If they can't survive today, the entire Baiwan business building there will be no more living people. Tomorrow, those thousands of people will become his experience endpoints. Passing through the space passage, Lin Fan's figure appeared at the North City Gate and the city wall. Chu Han, who had just walked out not long ago, both Yan and concubine Hu Yu were stunned. Standing on the tall and majestic city wall, at a glance, it was indescribably majestic. The walls on both sides spread all the way to the horizon, and there was no end in sight. A wall seemed to just like the world is separated, the inner city is quiet and dead, and the outer city is swarmed with zombies. Even under the city wall, there are hundreds of female warriors facing the boundless sea of corpses, constantly wiping out zombies one by one. Deng deng. Deng. Just when the two of them were so shocked that they couldn't recover, there was a burst of footsteps in front of them. Following the footsteps, there was a wave of hostile murderous aura, which was very powerful. It was terrifying, like a huge mountain pressing down on me. Concubine Hu Yu and Chu Hanyan looked forward warily, their eyes froze again. In front of them, several figures were galloping towards them. Yes, they were galloping. The speed was so fast that after images appeared in Hu Yu's eyes, which shocked her indescribably. There were 4 women who rushed over. The 4 women were wearing combat uniforms, black and white, holding tang knives, and marched in neat steps. The 4 women were like an army, with a fierce aura. Very strong. This was concubine Hu Yu's first feeling. The 4 women speeding in front of her gave her tremendous pressure. She couldn't keep up with that speed. She even felt that one of them could beat her. This feeling is like facing Chu Hanyan, who has just made a breakthrough. His aura is powerful and terrifying. However, compared to Chu Hanyan, these women in front of him are even more terrifying. Their auras are condensed like a steel knife. Chu Hanyan is facing them. One of them will be destroyed in a matter of minutes. Who? The distance of tens of meters was reached in the blink of an eye. Amidst the buzzing sound, 4 tang knives were pointed directly at the door between the two of them. The cold and evil aura that hit their faces almost froze concubine Hu Yu's whole body. Such a strong evil aura. What a scary woman. Not only concubine Hu Yu was frightened, but Chu Hanyan also froze in place. At this time, Lin Fan walked out of the space passage. Seeing Lin Fan, the 4 female warriors looked startled. With a look of fanaticism flashing in their eyes, they all knelt on the ground and shouted in unison, "See you, Lord." Awakened by the voices of the female warriors, concubine Hu Yu looked at the 4 female warriors in front of her in surprise, and then turned to look at Lin Fan. Although she had already guessed something in her heart, she was really surprised and shocked. This are they, Lin Fan's men? They are so powerful. That kind of speed and evil spirit are beyond her reach. With a faint smile on his face, Lin Fan almost smiled when he looked at the 4 female warriors half kneeling in front of him. It's blooming. Beautiful. So beautiful. So beautiful. This combat uniform cannot be more praised. He lowered his head at this angle. Woohoo, there's nothing he can't see. Feel comfortable. Everyone, get up. You have nothing to do here. Go on duty over there. Smacking his lips, Lin Fan waved his hand, and 4 bottles of source power pills flew in front of the 4 female warriors. The 4 female warriors stood up with joy and some unfinished thoughts. Lin Fan's eyes were not concealed. The 4 of them, his senses were very sensitive, and he had noticed Lin Fan's gaze a long time ago, but it was a pity that he didn't even kneel for a while before Lin Fan let them get up. Thank you, Lord, for the reward. Taking the Yuanli pill in front of them, the female warriors were very happy. They took advantage of it and even bought a Yuanli pill for free. This wave of people who came here is really not a loss. They made a lot of money. They thought that if they went back for a walk, they would let's talk about the situation here. I guess the other female soldiers on duty were so envious that they wanted to kill and silence them. As she watched the 4 female soldiers go away, Concubine Hu Yu turned to look at Lin Fan, and saw that Lin Fan was still a little bit unable to take it back. The look in my eyes makes me feel a little sour. Does it look good? Nice. Then catch up and take a look. Withdrawing his gaze, Lin Fan shook his head. Forget it, the feeling from a distance is the best. If I walked over now, they would definitely be willing to do anything, and there wouldn't be that smell. Although Concubine Hu Yu knew from the performance of those female warriors that what Lin Fan said was true, looking at Lin Fan's appearance, she really felt so angry. How about it, is my city okay? Pumping his palms on the wall next to him, Lin Fan had indescribable pride in his eyes. He built this with his own hands, and it took him a lot of effort. This is his masterpiece. Although he really doesn't want Lin Fan to continue to be proud, but Concubine Hu Yu has to say that the city wall is really shocking. It can be listed as one of the top 10 wonders of the world. Great. Quite splendid. Very shocking. I have only seen such a majestic city wall in the ancient capital, and that one was too dilapidated. It was not in the same condition as before. With such a width, it could be used for racing horses side by side. Chu Hanyan was not stingy with his words of praise at all. His beautiful eyes were filled with brilliance. He kept looking at the surrounding city walls with his gleaming eyes. He even couldn't help but touch his hands on the wall stacks. His little face was shocked. Licking a dog is not allowed in the house. Everything she wanted to say was snatched away. Concubine Hu Yu murmured quietly beside her, with a look of shock in her eyes. With such a city wall, it would be really difficult for zombies to invade. The inner city is really, it can be said to be the safest place in the apocalypse. As long as the inner city can develop, it might not be able to become a pure land in the apocalypse, and even restore the glory before the apocalypse. The lights are bright, the neon lights illuminate the sky, and people come and go, repeating the prosperity of the previous chilly foreign market. Lin Fan felt very comfortable hearing Chu Hanyan's praise. This was not in vain for the hard work he had put in building the city wall. With a smile on his face, Lin Fan looked outside the city. As the number of female warriors increased, and after daily cleaning, the zombies outside the city are no longer as dense as before. It won't be long before all the zombies nearby will be cleared away, right? Lin Fan is thinking about whether to expand the scale of the inner city and push the battle line out. Pushed further, after being silent for so long, the scope of influence should indeed be expanded. Burying this thought in his heart, Lin Fan glanced around and quickly found Li Yun's figure with a familiar aura. In fact, Li Yun is no longer under the city wall. This woman has advanced 2 kilometers. She has penetrated the main road dozens of meters wide by herself. The speed of the zombies rushing over cannot keep up with her killing speed. She really worked hard. Lin Fan felt that she probably didn't want to live up to the powerful ability he gave her. Another reason was that she probably wanted to become stronger faster and push further, so that she could be stronger earlier. Found Chu Hanyan. There were some things that Li Yun didn't want to mention to him even though her identity had changed. This woman still felt a little inferior because she didn't give him her complete body. In fact, Lin Fan really didn't mind. He really didn't mind a good family, and it wasn't a bus or shabby shoes, but he didn't bother to say it. It would be useless to say it anyway. Mature women will love others. Thinking of the morning, Lin Fan couldn't help but smacked his lips. With a grab, Li Yun, who was 2 kilometers away, disappeared on the spot, and was grabbed directly by Lin Fan. The figure appeared on the city wall, face to face with Lin Fan. Li Yun's eyes flashed with joy, and she raised her arms to hug Lin Fan. On the neck, he tiptoed and kissed him. He wanted to remind him, but he was sent to his side. Lin Fan had no reason to refuse, so he hugged Li Yun and went back. Although the two were very happy, Chu Hanyan felt a little uncomfortable. Li Yun's figure appeared just now. Although it was just a back view, how familiar was Chu Hanyan? You could tell without looking at her face that this must be her mother, but before she could speak, she saw the next person. The scene below made my heart sour. After giving Chu Hanyan a pitiful look, concubine Hu Yu didn't know what to say now, so she could only pat Chu Hanyan's shoulder comfortingly. She didn't know how to look. How does it feel to feel like the person you have a crush on is intimate with someone else, but it must be extremely uncomfortable to think about it, especially. That woman is still her mother. Good sister, you have to be strong. At worst, give it a try. Doomsday, I am the only one in the world who has superpowers. Author, Gugu Da. Chapter 230. Chapter 230. Mother and daughter gather together. The battlefield without gunpowder smoke is too scary. Although she knew that concubine Hu Yu was comforting her, she still. But what should Chu Hanyan do if he really wants to cry? Do you really want to grab it? This, not so good. However, I always feel very excited. Especially looking at Li Yun's back, she really wants to now, I want to shout, but for no other reason, it would be good to at least interrupt the two of them. That, Mom? Is it you? Finally shouting these words, Chu Hanyan felt so happy. It was like drinking a large glass of ice water in the dog days of summer. His heart was chilled and his heart was soaring. Suddenly he heard such words coming from behind him, and he was still so excited. Li Yun was stunned by the familiar voice. She quickly let go of Lin Fan and looked behind her in disbelief. When she saw Chu Hanyan standing there, Li Yun was indescribably surprised. Yaner. Just when he was about to rush over, he found Lin Fan's arm around his waist. Recalling the scene just now, Li Yun was numb. Seeing his mother's dull look, Chu Hanyan felt better. Yes, yes. That's the expression. Exactly. Tell you to face me. But Li Yun was Li Yun after all, and she quickly realized that she had said at the beginning that she had nothing to be afraid of facing her daughter, and just like what she said, she had nothing to be embarrassed about facing Chu Hanyan. Pulling Lin Fan's arm into his arms, Li Yun walked up to Chu Hanyan and introduced Hanyan. Mom will introduce to you, Lin Fan, Mom's future man and support, if not the Lord, maybe Mom your fate was so terrible. It's really great that you were rescued by my Lord. Chu Hanyan felt a little embarrassed because of Li Yun's blatant or generous introduction. This title was so outrageous. What the hell is Lord? Yes, what should she call her? Chu Han's cigarette butt was so big. Seemingly sensing Chu Hanyan's distress, Lin Fan nodded to Li Yun. After receiving the signal, Li Yun said softly, don't worry about so many things. Everyone has their own business. Why don't you also call me Lord? That's what everyone in the inner city calls me anyway. Farewell, don't teach bad children like that. If you are Han Yan, just call me Lin Fan or Brother Fan, interrupted Li Yun's behavior of teaching bad children. In fact, Lin Fan secretly told Lin Yu and the others about this kind of thing. It's okay for those maidens, and warriors to call them that. It's not good for Lin Yu and the others to call them that. As a result, Lin Yu what Yo-Yo and the others meant was that they called her Shun Xiang. Now they can only slowly change it, but it seems that the progress is not very good. But Brother Fan. What else did Li Yun want to say? Chu Hanyan was faster than her. He just said two words and blocked Li Yun's words. Concubine Hu Yu stepped aside without leaving any trace. Good guy, this scene is too scary. Battlefields where gunpowder can't be seen are the most terrifying. She didn't dare to get too close. She was afraid that she wouldn't know how she died. After taking a deep look at Chu Hanyan, Li Yun gave up and said anything. She had already roughly seen something. After seeing the signs, he did not correct Chu Hanyan's title issue. After being glanced at by Li Yun, Chu Hanyan felt guilty and quickly looked away. His whole body was like a deflated ball. Chu Hanyan was brought back, and reunited the mother and daughter. Lin Fan settled a worry in his heart, exchanged a tang sword and threw it to concubine Hu Yu. Looking at her confused eyes, Lin Fan said, if you want to become stronger, this tang knife is a must. You can become stronger by killing zombies with this knife, just like those female warriors just now. Looking at the tang sword in her hand, concubine Hu Yu recalled that the 4 female warriors just now were holding tang swords like this, including Chu Hanyan. She also looked at the city wall just now. The swords held by those female warriors look similar. This is also the case. Although it is a bit unbelievable that you can become stronger by killing zombies with a knife, and it feels like playing an online game to defeat monsters and upgrade, but what else is unbelievable now? Zombies have come out, and superpowers have also appeared. No matter how outrageous things are, they don't seem to be unacceptable. Oh, I almost forgot. This is a watch. It represents your identity. Your military exploits and other things in the future will be recorded on it. Take out 2 watches and hand them to Chu Hanyan and concubine Hu Yu. After finishing all this, Lin Fan left the 3 girls and strolled towards the city gate tower. On the city gate tower, Su Yan was on duty today. When he saw Lin Fan come over, even though she had just heard the news about Lin Fan's appearance from the team members, she was still very excited now that Lin Fan came over. Although she hated men in her heart and regarded all men as maggots, except Lin Fan. Lord. Kneeling half in front of Lin Fan, Su Yan half tilted her upper body. She and her team members had studied that this posture would allow Lin Fan to discover more beauty. After admiring it with wide eyes, Lin Fan was satisfied. He nodded, waved his hand, and a force pulled Su Yan up. Get up, don't worry about me, I'll stay here for a while. Yes, Su Yan's tone was a little pity, the time he had just knelt down was too short. With a wave of his hand, a comfortable recliner appeared on the city gate building. Lin Fan turned over and lay down on it. Seeing Lin Fan lying down, Su Yan thought for a while, waved to the female warrior next to him, and whispered a few instructions. The female warrior nodded quickly. Not long after, 2 female warriors came up carrying the table and the fruit plate. The orchard at the hospital is now very popular. Su Yan and the others often spend money to buy some fruits to eat. These fruits contain some wood element energy, which is good for the body. However, Su Yan and the others are too strong. This benefit is not very obvious, but it is definitely delicious. Su Yan and the others now live in a villa close to the city wall. All conditions are very good. They eat hot rice and fragrant stir-fry every day. When they are not on duty, they can also watch some TV series and the like. With melon seeds and fruits, the living conditions are very high. The apocalypse is coming. Although the network signal is cut off due to the explosion at Jinbei Power Station, many of the computers in the villas have some videos downloaded to the local area. These can still be watched, not to mention the CDs and USBs. Plate these things. After Cao Shan, the power supervisor, unblocks the power in the inner city and the base station is restored, the internet will be available again. The 2 female warriors put down the table and placed all the snacks they had brought. Lin Fan did not stop him and lay down on the chair leisurely. The female warrior next to him also specially washed his hands with water several times. He picked up a strawberry and brought it to Lin Fan. Another female warrior was kneeling next to Lin Fan, gently massaging Lin Fan's vagina. Seeing this scene, Su Yan turned her head away with satisfaction and continued to stare at the situation under the city wall. Lin Fan hadn't been comfortable here for long when a roar came from under the city wall, which was in the direction of the inner city. After a while, Mu Qingxiu came to the city wall led by a female warrior. Lin Fan looked at Mu Qingxiu who was arriving unexpectedly, and glanced at Su Yan. She had thought carefully and called Mu Qingxiu who was staying in the hospital. Looking at the Guqin held in Mu Qingxiu's arms, Lin Fan nodded. He listened to Mu Qingxiu's live song yesterday and it was indeed very good. Mu Qingxiu walked up to Lin Fan and bowed, then walked to the side and sat down. The female warrior had already prepared everything for her. The melodious sound of the piano was different from yesterday's excitement, but after Mu Qingxiu's playing, it had a different flavor. The sound of the piano was floating, and Lin Fan lay comfortably on the chair, listening to the live version of Mu Qingxiu playing, with a female warrior waiting beside him. This feeling was really great. Under the city wall, Li Yun had brought Chu Hanyan and concubine Hu Yu to the outer city. Along the way, Li Yun and Chu Hanyan talked about some things that had happened before, such as how Lin Fan saved her and what she had done. Li Yun basically told Chu Hanyan how she got to where she is today. Chu Hanyan also told Li Yun about her situation for more than a month, but concubine Hu Yu was a little embarrassed. Before the end, she ran to her daughter and tried to kidnap her but failed. In front of her mother, Hu Yu concubine Yu is indeed embarrassed. But Li Yun didn't pay much attention to it. The past was gone, and the present was different from before. Concubine Hu Yu has her own skills, and Chu Hanyan has also eaten the source power crystal. Li Yun did not arrange them to join the large army. If they were placed there, it would drag down the female warriors there, and the total number of zombies would be there are only so many. If concubine Hu Yu and Chu Hanyan kill more, others will definitely have fewer, and their improvement will be slower. Instead of doing this, it is better to stay here. If the two of them team up, there will be absolutely no danger, and they will adapt much faster, especially Chu Hanyan. It takes a lot of fighting to adapt to the sudden surge in power. You two, please pay attention. There will be no problem. I will not be far from you. Improve your strength. Strength is the foundation of everything. After leaving these words, Li Yun left and rushed towards the group of zombies. With a wave of his hand, the space was cut through the air. A large area of the zombies that rushed towards him were instantly cleared away. They looked extremely fierce and killed the zombies. Just like cutting wheat, a large area of Li Yun appeared in one fell swoop. Concubine Hu Yu swallowed, glanced at Chu Hanyan with pity, patted her on the shoulder and said, "Good sister, why don't we just forget it? Your mother is too fierce. Look, she killed hundreds of zombies in just 1 second. With the two of us tied together, it's probably not enough for your mother to wave her hand. The enemy is too strong. It's not that the sisters won't help you, but in this case, the enemy is already invincible. If we don't know each other, we'll either die or die. Do you understand what I mean?" Chu Hanyan thought that she would die suddenly after taking a Dahuan Dan, but she didn't expect that Ginger is still hot. "Sure enough, your mother is still your mother, and I won't hesitate to beat you." With her strength, I guess he was beaten to pieces before he even got close. Is this reasonable? He was at the level of a world boss. Is this reasonable? This is obviously very unreasonable. The rebel army was crushed to pieces on the spot as soon as they had some signs of success. Chu Hanyan felt aggrieved. This is so unreasonable. How could anyone come up and play like this? Chu Hanyan's head drooped, like an eggplant beaten by frost, and his energy and spirit were all beaten away. Looking at it with Chu Hanyan looking like this, concubine Hu Yu helplessly slapped her forehead and said she was done. In front of the two of them, Li Yun had been paying attention to their situation. Seeing Chu Hanyan's appearance, Li Yun rolled her eyes. This girl is really not easy to worry about, just this little perseverance. Just this? Just this? She still wants to steal a man? It will embarrass her even if she says it. She is worthless. She is so worthless.